The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right, good evening, everyone. This is the October 12th, 2020 Westminster City Council pre-meeting. We're only going to try to cover one item tonight. We do have a very full agenda. And Mr. Tripp, I'm not sure who you have presented on the CDBG plan.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, that would be someone from economic development. It'll be either Jenny or Molly's. Jenny, maybe you want to kick this off and
Yes.
pass it to, looks like maybe Heidi. Part of the reason Heidi's here is that issue. So go ahead, Jenny, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Don. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and councilors. Tonight, we're going to provide you with a brief high-level overview of the city's 2020 to 24 Consolidated Plan for the Community Development Block Grant Program. This 5-year plan, which is a required component of our participation with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, is completed through a rigorous process that involves survey work, analysis of demographics, and citizen engagement. This presentation kicks off a 30-day public review process, during which time the community, including council, is encouraged to review the draft plan, which is attached to your agenda memo this evening, provide comments, and ask questions. That input will be captured, reviewed, and made part of the record when the final plan is brought back to council on November 23rd to request formal approval. Chase Evans, Real Estate and Development Administrator, is going to follow me with a summary of the major points in this process. And we also have Heidi Agler of Route Policy here with us this evening to answer questions. Next slide, please. The city's vision statement captures much of what the CDBG program is intended to do: to help communities thrive by investing in neighborhoods through projects that improve safety and that are inclusive of all members. Next slide.
Thank you. I'll take it from here, Jenny. As Jenny mentioned, the reason we're here is to talk about the 2020-2024 Consolidated Plan. Now, this plan is required by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and is based on a few different points. It looks at both the housing and community development needs, as well as our priorities and goals for the next 5 years. And that's important to note that it's a forward-looking 5-year plan. These needs, priorities, and goals are determined based on community input, economic data, as well as CDBG investments in the past, as well as just feasibility and staff requirements. In addition to the consolidated plan that we are focused tonight, the city is also required to complete an annual action plan that determines the funding levels for any specific program year. In the case of the 2020 program year, this is actually a part of the 2020-2024 consolidated plan. For all other program years, the annual action plan is a standalone plan that is brought before council each and every year. As council is fully aware, HUD has a lot of restrictions on the types of projects that CDBG funds can be spent on. But generally speaking, these project activities that could use CDBG funds include affordable housing activities, certain public facility and infrastructure improvements, as well as economic development or redevelopment. Next slide. As I mentioned, HUD has a lot of rules on how the funds can be spent. Any CDBG funds that are spent are required to meet at least one of 3 HUD national objectives. The first of the 3 are to benefit low and moderate income persons. Now, this could be either to directly support affordable housing, or it could be more indirect, and the funds could be used to target an area where the resident population is at least 50% low to moderate income persons. Secondly, the CDB funds can be used to aid in the prevention or elimination of slums or blight, as well as these CDBG funds can be used to meet a need having particular urgency. This third HUD national objective is generally thought of or generally used in a disaster response situation. It's not something that is used very frequently. One thing that's worth noting is that council is probably familiar with the term CDBG CV funds. These have been mentioned on various occasions during our COVID updates. These CDBG CV funds were provided. There are additional CDBG funds that were provided as part of the CARES Act. And the CDBG CV program is actually an amendment to the 2019 annual action plan. So as far as specific programming or use of these CDBG CV funds, it's not going to be included in the consolidated plan or discussed in this presentation. We would certainly be happy to come back and present to council at a later point to talk through the CDBG CV funds as far as how those funds are intended to be programmed, as there's still a lot that's going on, and HUD is still releasing guidance as to how those funds need to be spent and how things can be recorded. So we can certainly circle back at that at a later time. Next slide, please. Before we dive too far into the 2020-2024 consolidated plan, I'd like to just take a quick moment to do a brief recap on the 2015-2019 consolidated plan. The reason for this is as you'll see, although there are different projects that are going to be proposed for the 2020-2024 consolidated plan, the overarching goals are very similar to what we had in 2015 through 2019. So the first of the goals for the 2015-2019 was generally around addressing needs around housing. So the city has had for a number of years an emergency and essential home repair grant program, and over the 2015-2019 timeframe, there were 90 qualifying grantees that took advantage of this program. We'll go into more detail on this. This program is expected to be continued into 2020. It's a very successful program that we're happy to see continue. Another project that was performed throughout the previous consolidated plan period was to pay off the Section 108 loan. I won't go into those details. That was the loan that we've discussed a few times as it relates to the 73rd and Lowell property. The next goal or the next need that was addressed was generally around public facilities and infrastructure. I won't go through each one of these, although you can tell by the names, these projects generally had to do with streetscape or lighting improvements throughout the city. Well, I'm sorry, throughout low and area median incomes. So all of these projects are considered an area benefit. So they have to fall within certain areas of the city that meet the HUD's definition of a low to moderate, an area with low to moderate area persons. The only one I will call out specifically is the design of pedestrian safety and streetscape for improvements for Hooker Street. This project was started as part of the 2019 plan year, and it was the design component of this redevelopment of Hooker Street. The actual construction and the improvements will take place, and you'll see that again in the 2020 consolidated plan. So it was a breakup of the design component with the actual construction. Next slide, please. So as far as the actual consolidated plan is laid out, this is a plan that is very heavily dictated by HUD, and although it is considered a single plan, it really is made up of several plans that build into what is this consolidated plan. So just to give a quick overview on the large or the significant subsections of the consolidated plan. The first is there's obviously an executive summary, and this is just generally an overview of the goals, projects, and reporting requirements that the city is required to follow through HUD. Next is an overview of process and responsible parties. This is an overview again of the overall consolidated plan process, as well as discusses the partnerships that the city has with other organizations such as Adams County. Heidi can mention it a little bit later this evening, but a lot of our data collection and community outreach was done both at the city level and at the county level. So there was a lot of partnership that took place between the city and Adams County. Next is the needs assessment and housing market analysis sections or plans. These generally address the need for affordable housing as well as community development. And then the strategic plan and annual action plan both speak to the goals and projects. And then specifically with the annual action plan, this ties specific dollar amounts that are programmed for the given 2020 program year with the specific projects that are identified for that program year. And lastly is the citizen participation plan. Obviously, as we mentioned, it's very important to seek community input as we're going through the consolidated plan, as well as for any and every annual action plan. So the CPP, or the citizen participation plan, speaks to and provides guidelines for the communication and outreach with our citizens and residents to make sure that they have the opportunity to participate in the CDBG program. Next slide, please. I'm going to quickly turn it over to Heidi to speak to a little bit on this next slide. This is in discussion of the citizen participation as it relates to the development of the 2020-2024 consolidated plan.
Great, thank you, Chase. Thank you, Chase. As Chase mentioned, we coordinated the creation of the consolidated plan and the community engagement with Adams County. We had a joint survey that we administered with Adams County. This survey collected information on housing needs, on housing preferences, if people wanted to move, what type of home they wanted to move to, if they were having trouble buying a home, what kinds of features they like in their neighborhood, walkability, proximity to transit or jobs or shopping. We did have a subsample of almost 300 residents from Westminster who completed that survey. Really good representation in that survey of your Hispanic population, of people who are low income, of renters. To supplement that survey effort, we had a booth, and it seems it's about a year ago. It's almost hard to imagine. We had a booth in an outdoor festival where we talked with people. It was at your Halloween Harvest Festival. We had exercises that they participated in to capture their preferences, their needs, their concerns. And then we also did a bilingual focus group, and that we coordinated with Maker Housing Partners and Growing Home to do a focus group. We facilitated that in Spanish with people who have challenges accessing housing. I also presented right before COVID. I think it was about the week before a Safer at Home order took place to your inclusivity board, provided them with information, an update on our community engagement efforts, as well as the housing analysis. And then we always interview local service providers about needs. We made a really concerted effort to capture Spanish-speaking residents and lower-income households, as well as people with disabilities in the outreach. Thanks, Chase. Back to you.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Before I dive into the specific goals as well as the projects for the 2020 Annual Action Plan, I'd like to just say a couple of kind of high-level comments regarding a strategic shift from the previous Consolidated Plan to the 2020-2024 Consolidated Plan. One of these strategic shifts is that the previous Consolidated Plan was very specific in terms of its goals and projects. And this, for various reasons, provided a lot of challenges for staff and ultimately ended up in multiple occasions resulting in the city being out of compliance with HUD. So in being cognizant of that, the city has really revamped how we've framed and stated our goals and projects so that they are a little bit broader, so that as things change year by year, we can be a little bit more nimble and address them and adapt as things change over time to better align the city maintaining compliance with HUD. Also, as we've mentioned in multiple city council meetings, the city staff have recommended shifting away from real estate acquisition and towards projects that can be completed in a shorter typically more of a 1 to 2 year time frame. This doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be smaller or less meaningful projects. It's really more of the, perhaps breaking up projects. As I mentioned with the Hooker Street Pedestrian Improvement Project, we broke up the design component in 1 year and then the actual construction the following year. So that's some of the strategy that we've taken moving forward. So as far as goals, similar to the past years though, we have really two main goals. The first is to preserve and expand affordable housing. The city plans to address this goal in 2020 with three main projects. The first is the Emergency and Essential Home Repair Program, which is a continuation of the existing program. This program helps low-income individuals with making emergency and safety and mobility repairs to their homes up to $5,000. This, going into the winter season, this program typically helps a lot of residents stay in place and also age in place, as sometimes a hot water heater or a furnace going out could be the difference of them staying in their home versus having to find alternative housing arrangements. Secondly is the affordable housing site improvements. So this would be this CDBG providing funds for new affordable housing developments, specifically for site or streetscape improvements. CDBG does not allow CDBG funds to be used for the actual construction of the building. It does allow for the funds to be used for streetscape and site improvements. So this would be looked at as a tool to help close any affordable housing gap. And we can look at this before considering other methods we have of closing the gap, such as refunding or rebating development fees and taxes, as may happen and has happened in various affordable housing projects. And lastly, for this goal is the Affordable Housing Preservation Project. This is looking at preserving existing multifamily affordable housing projects that perhaps have, due to age, are in need of repairs, such as leaking roofs, perhaps failing fire systems. So this would provide grants to repair these properties to allow them to continue to maintain affordability for the foreseeable future. The second goal is to provide infrastructure and streetscape improvements. Right now, the first project that is currently planned for 2020, for the 2020 Annual Action Plan, is to complete the pedestrian safety and streetscape improvements for Hooker Street. So this is providing sidewalk expansion as well as solar-powered lighting that will provide access to both residents that are in the Westminster Station TOD, as well as the surrounding neighborhoods, provide better access to the Westminster Station, as well as the RTD station and the Westminster Station Park. Next slide, please. So this next slide, I'm not going to go through all of the goals and the projects as you see towards the bottom of the slide. These are the same things I just went over. So for 2020, the city is receiving $631,000 for its 2020 CDBG allocation. We also have just under $800,000 from prior year resources. Now this could be from a variety of sources: funds that were not spent, admin funds that were not spent, payback of funds as it relates to 7225 Bradburn Boulevard. So in total, we have $1.4 million to program for the 2020 program year. Off the top, CDBG allows for up to 20% to be allocated towards administration of the CDBG program. The city has done this typically. We have one full-time staff that is paid for out of this CDBG administration bucket. Any unspent administration funds are automatically rolled into the next year's, for example, prior year resources. The previous year we had about of that 798,000, about 50,000 of that was admin funds that were not spent, that rolled over. And then in total for goal 1 to preserve and expand affordable housing, we are projecting $780,000 to go towards that goal, broken up between $40,000 for the emergency and essential home repair, $250,000 for affordable housing site improvements, and $490,000 for affordable housing and preservation. Now, the emergency and essential home repair at $40,000 may look lower in comparison to everything else. That was done intentionally because there are still funds from the 2018 and 2019 program years that have not been spent. So we reduced the amount that was allocated to this project because, like I just said, there's additional funds still to be spent in addition to that $40,000. Lastly, the Hooker Street pedestrian safety and streetscape improvements, we have budgeted $523,000, which is really the remainder of our $1.4 million. Next slide, please. So to wrap up for tonight, as Jenny mentioned, tomorrow, October 13th, the staff will be submitting our consolidated plan for a 30-day public comment period. As staff, as well as council, we would welcome everyone's comments over that 30-day period. Comments can be provided by either email or phone, and comments will be tracked and included in the final consolidated plan. Staff will then return on November 23rd to City Council for a public hearing, and we will allow for additional public comment, as well as to seek approval from City Council on the formal consolidated plan. So with that, I'll go ahead and wrap it up. I know we still have a few minutes for questions. Like Jenny mentioned earlier, if there are not questions this evening, we can certainly answer questions over the public comment period if they come up. Thank you.
Chase, I have one person who said they've got a question, but I would remind everyone just that the public comment period alone for council opens tomorrow. Is that right, Chase?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. Mayor Pro Tem Sites, you have a question?
I do have a question. A couple of questions real quick, and if I need to email them because we run out of time, I understand. One of the things you mentioned was kind of moving strategically away from purchases of properties to some of these more short-term projects. I was, in our strategic housing assessment or the planning that we did, one of the tools that we kind of learned about was land banking. And are we concerned kind of reconciling that recommendation with this decision to change, which I understand we run into a lot of issues with a lot of encumbered properties. But are we concerned about losing that really valuable tool to assist with affordable housing?
So Chase, I can respond on that. Mayor Pro Tem Sites, we are actually looking at a couple of properties being able to utilize that tool, excuse me. Holly Park obviously was one. We will certainly continue to look at it as it relates to city-owned property as a way to preserve long-term affordability. I think that the brief answer is that we want to continue to use that tool. However, we would make sure that we acquired the property with non-federal funds so that we didn't tie up the rest of the project with that. It really becomes mostly a matter of timing. As we know, development can have a lot of different reasons for being delayed, and we don't want to put the city in the position of being out of compliance when circumstances that are out of everyone's control happen.
Absolutely. So thank you for answering that. And that is glad to know we're not abandoning that strategy, because I do think it seems like an effective one. So one of the things that was mentioned was that third national objective to meet a need having a particular urgency. And obviously there's a lot more need post-COVID than there was before. And this is already a portion of our town, as you mentioned, that has 50% lower than median income. So might be disproportionately feeling the pain of that. When I saw in our packet that there was only $40,000 for emergency home repairs, I was concerned. And so I'm heartened to hear that there's still additional monies left over from this year to be spent. Can you give us, and I apologize if I missed the exact number. What is that number?
There's a fund balance of approximately $200,000 remaining in the emergency and essential home repair account. Those funds do roll over from year to year, which is why we're still working through the 2018 and 2019 allocations. We certainly did see a slowdown this year because of COVID-19 and the inability for the contractors to enter homes. So we do anticipate that as conditions allow, we will see an uptick. We are also going to be exploring, but I emphasize exploring, the possibility. Part of what we grouped under the infrastructure was, we know that in some older areas of town, we have issues with sewer laterals collapsing. So individual home service, not larger systems. We want to dig into that and see if that might be another area of home repair where we could effectively utilize these funds to help ensure that such a high cost home repair doesn't put someone in a precarious position of having to leave their home. So we certainly will be looking at some additional ways to use that home repair service. And yeah, I think that we will see great success with that.
You were almost reading my mind as far as maybe expanding the uses for that. I'm curious, are plumbing leaks something that we can use those dollars to assist?
Generally speaking, yes. If they're considered a critical component of the home system, it covers that. We see the majority of the funds used for furnaces and water heaters, but there are certainly other eligible expenses, electrical repairs, a lot of times accessibility improvements. So it is broader than we often talk about.
If possible, I'm on a train here. If possible, I would like to see if we can use it now that we have the new meters that can detect leaks. If it is an eligible expense, it would be great if the city could also let people in the eligible portion of town, and I actually believe home repair can be done anywhere, know about this program so that they can apply for it if it is an eligible expense. Because oftentimes telling people a leak, if they don't have the money to fix it, to call a plumber, it is, while it's knowledge, it's not immediately helpful. So if there's any way that we could leverage these federal dollars to assist people who are getting higher water bills, or maybe even getting knocked into another tier because of a leak, giving them a way that they can actually afford to fix that leak. Better for our system because we don't want to waste water, and immediately helpful to that resident.
Thank you for the suggestion. We work closely with Public Works on a lot of other outreach, and so we can certainly collaborate with them on communications.
And clearly only if that's appropriate. And you mentioned the sewer lateral. I would wonder, and you don't have to answer here, if your main line in from the freshwater side is also an eligible expense, but you can email me the answer to that.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just very briefly, I know we're running out of time here, and I sent in some questions earlier today, and I got comments back. Thank you very much. And then also Mayor Pro Tem Sites asked the question I had, which was, how can those funds be used for people in need? We definitely have that need right now. So I think you addressed that. How do we get, I guess my question is, how do we get the word out? How do we allow people to know in eligible areas that this program exists? I'm curious how we get the word out.
Sure. So typically about this time of year, Councilor Bowles, we will do a greater push through email blast and social media, knowing that the need tends to escalate going into cold weather. We always have the link active on our city website under Homeowner Resources, and we rely heavily on our partners as they are out in the community as part of their mission in installing upgrades. In fact, we do see a lot of word of mouth as an effective tool with this program, but we always invite other suggestions and certainly the help of council in making sure that this is well known through the community. So we would definitely invite additional suggestions through this comment period as well.
Very good. And I probably will do that. So thank you. I think it's a great suggestion. And then one last comment. The fact that you had Heidi mentioned in her report as part of this plan that there's outreach to our Spanish speaking residents and that you did a presentation to our inclusivity board. I think that is outstanding. So thank you for doing that. And I know this has been an issue and a concern with the inclusivity board for a long time. Way back when I served on it, we talked about it often. So thank you for doing that and keeping them in the loop and taking their input. And I hope they'll also be involved as well as we do the public comment. So thank you for the presentation tonight.
All right, council, you have about 3 minutes before we will reconvene as the city council meeting. So if you need to make a quick pit stop, let's try to do it soon. We have a very long agenda tonight. So we will reconvene in about 3 minutes.
Seltzer water. Liz, I was unmuted.
All right, Ms. Parker, are we live?
Yes, we are, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Good evening, everyone. This is the Westminster City Council meeting of October the 12th of 2020. At this time, I will call the meeting to order and ask us if you would please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Parker, if you would now take a roll of the council.
Certainly. Mayor Atchison.
Here.
Councilor Demott.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Sites.
Here.
Councilor Seymour.
Here.
Councilor Scully.
Here.
Councilor Smith.
Present.
And Councilor Vols.
Here.
All right, council, next item on the agenda is the consideration of the minutes of September the 28th. We have someone like to make the motion on that. Mr. Seymour, I think you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the City Council approve the minutes of the September 28th meeting as presented.
Councilor Demott.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by aye.
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 Is any objections? Hearing none, we will move on to the next item. There are no items on the list for presentations tonight. Ms. Parker, do you have any issues with public comment?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we did receive public comment, both written testimony, which was forwarded to council when the packet was posted on Wednesday, and then any others that were received before the deadline of noon today were also sent forward to you today, as well as added to the packet, which has been published and posted online. In addition, we do have some voicemails that we received from members of our community. No one has requested comment during our live meeting. So at this point, I will ask Matt Williams if he would please move on to our voicemail testimony.
This is James David Hughes. I live in Lexington in Westminster, and I have no confidence whatsoever in Don Tripp. He doesn't even live in the state.
Good day, Westminster City Council. This is Mark Lomax, a citizen of Westminster. I would like to find out what is going on with the water rates. Might have more than doubled in the last couple months. I think we should recall any of the people who voted for that. And I think Westminster needs to figure out what is going on and bring these water rates back into line, especially in these times when lots of people are out of work, they're losing their jobs, they do not have the income that they need to survive on anyway, and you can honestly sleep at night by doubling their water rates. Please reconsider, Westminster. This is just not right. Thank you very much.
This is Alexa Schlechter, Westminster resident. I am calling to because I am very concerned about the Westminster water recall pod. The way that they're going about explaining it, I was approached at Costco asking me to assign the water recall and was told it would lower my rates. This is indeed not true. And the people who are putting on the water recall position are garnering signatures based on false information. I'm deeply concerned about this, and I think that they are misrepresenting what the water increase, what it's for and the purpose behind it, and also misleading the public. Those signatures should be null and void.
My name is Lori Goldstein, and I'm a 22-year resident of Westminster. The longer the recall efforts go on, the more I learn, and I'm learning that a lot of deceit and bullying is occurring. The group heading up this recall is putting slips of paper on doors telling residents to sign a petition aimed at lowering Westminster's excessive water. If a person goes to one of the petition signing stations and has a conversation with one of the folks at the station, They are given a lot of misleading information. They will tell you that in June, Councilman Seymour made a proposal to reduce water rates by 20%. The council voted 4-3 to not entertain this idea. While this might be true, they neglect to tell you that the whole council voted in May to freeze the rates for 2021. They also neglect to tell you that the Councilman Seymour's proposal came totally out of the blue. There was no information, no data, or facts to back up this proposal. The 4 voting against wanted more information, data, and facts in order to make an educated decision. Something the community fails to understand that the council members all pay for water too, and they are going to have to face the same consequences as the citizens affected by their vote. Thank you, Mayor Atchison, Mayor Pro Tem Anita Seitz, Council members Catherine Scully and John Bold for agreeing to do a study session so a thoughtful, educated decision can be made. Shame on Council members Dave DeMont, Lindsay Smith, and Rich Seymour. You are part of this recall whether you admit it or not. If you were not, you would be discouraging this gross abuse of the democratic process. Instead, you say nothing. You make unreasonable proposals, vote as a slate, just to make the others look bad. You are elected officials who should be showing leadership skills that help the city move forward. You 3 are bringing the city backwards. I would hope the voters of Westminster would want their city council members to make thoughtful, data-driven decisions. They would not want their city council members being divisive. They would not want their city council members bullying city staff so they quit. They would not want city council members who do not have the best interests of the city as a whole at heart. Citizens who are interested in this situation is that this recall is going to cost $200,000. Is that worth it? We will have to pay as a city to conduct it. Where do you think the money is going to come from? My suggestion to council members DeMott, Smith, and Seymour: when you are making a decision that will affect the city of Westminster, keep these 4 things in mind. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? If it is your agenda to be divisive and antagonistic to the other members sitting on the council, you are the dysfunction. I suggest you work with the other 4 to find common ground. It's there if you just use your leadership skills to find it. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Bev Bishop. I want to make a public comment regarding the current endeavor to recall certain city council members. I would like to speak in support of all of our city council members. I think they have an extremely difficult role in trying to balance individual residents' concerns with overreaching community needs for the long term. I think they do a tremendous job with this. I definitely do not support the recall effort, which is now underway. Too many other side issues are being raised that are not relevant to this topic of water rates. If people have a serious concern regarding any current city council member, they will have an opportunity to simply not vote for them at the next scheduled municipal election. Thank you.
My name is Jackson Dreiling, 1272 West 135th Place. My family and I are very much against any recall over current water rates. It is not that we are concerned about the higher than average rates that we as Westminster residents experience, especially those of our neighbors who may be hurting financially. Rather, we believe strongly in the leadership of our Mayor Pro Tem, Anita Seitz. She is a true public servant and puts the collective good above all else, especially politics. Anita has expressed her own concern over increasing water rates. However, she knows that she has a responsibility to the city charter and to all of us as residents. And that has and will continue to be her focus, her responsibility to us. While increased water rates may be painful in the short term, there are programs in place to help those in financial need pay their water bills. Furthermore, the health and safety of our community is directly tied to the infrastructure that we hold. Chief among them is our water. We have to make the necessary investments to ensure that all of us have the opportunity to be safe and healthy when drinking our city water. And failure here is a failure in leadership and responsibility. Anita has not allowed that to happen. Additionally, the city charter provides for our water infrastructure to be paid by our rates as it serves the public. Due to the growth of the city over the years, the infrastructure is in need of repair, but those repairs may not be taken out of other budgeted dollars solely. I feel that the information being spread is disingenuous and politically motivated. I ask my neighbors and fellow residents to consider the facts for themselves and be thankful for the responsible leadership of our Mayor Pro Tem, Anita Sykes.
Mr. Mayor, that concludes all of the voicemail public comments that were received. And just to reiterate, we did receive written comments, which were attached and published to our packet online and forwarded to council. And no one has requested speaking live during the public meeting.
All right, thank you, ma'am. We'll move on from the item and move on to the next point, which is the report of city officials. Mr. Tripp.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, I have no report this evening. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to council, Councilor DeMott, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to take a moment to thank the folks who called in and voiced their voice tonight. I think it's really a cornerstone of democracy that we have a First Amendment right. Whether you agree with me or you agree with other council members, I always encourage you to bring that voice forward. It's really what makes our system work, is being able to come to your elected officials who represent you and say, here's what I think. So I very much appreciate everybody's input, as well as, there was the idea brought up about who's backing the recall. I think it's an interesting question to question this council, because every single member, including the members who are on the recall petition, have fought to make sure that those individuals have a right to go through the process that's laid out in our charter. So I'd give kudos really actually to this entire group, including those that are in the midst of the crosshairs of this effort, to make sure that the citizens are allowed to do the things that they're allowed to do in a free society. So again, thank you everybody for your voice tonight and your comments. I truly appreciate them, and I hope that we hear more from you next time.
Councilor Bowles.
I also want to echo the sentiments of Councilor DeMott. I want to thank everyone for commenting, and it allows us to do our job better when we hear what residents are thinking and what's on their mind, and they share that with us. So thank you very much to everyone who shared their thoughts with us this evening, and I hope we continue to have that. I know it's a little more difficult doing things virtually and through the phone and online, but thank you for taking that effort, and it does allow us to do a better job as council members. I did want to, and Mayor, may I ask the city manager a question? Is it possible on something related to a citizen comment, a letter we received, an email that's in our packet for tonight? I did want to, at some point, I don't want to take up a lot of time, but someone raised an issue about the elimination of resident rates at our golf courses. And at some point, I'd like to get a little bit more background. I think we maybe have been given information, but I have to apologize ahead of time. I don't remember what it was, and I'm sure we did. But at some point, I'd like an answer on why it is, or what's the reason, and then do cities and towns around us do the same thing? So related to our resident fees at our golf courses. I know we had a letter in our packet from a citizen or resident tonight asking that question. I would like an answer at some point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments, Councilor Bowles?
No, that's it. Thank you very much.
Mayor Pro Tem Sykes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have just some brief comments. I do want to say thank you to all of our residents for calling in. I've said consistently that I do think that when we hear from our residents, we make better policy decisions. And I do appreciate kind words, as any human being does. So thank you for people who called in that are upset with me, and thank you for the support of those who called in to express that. I did want to, I have had some pretty sobering news presented to us on council in regards to Adams County's infection rates. And I know that this is being presented tonight, in addition to last week's meeting. I saw a video from Adams 12 Superintendent Chris Gadowski, really just pleading with all of us, please, for our kids' sake, be really precious with every interaction, every time we go into public, and the choices that we make. You know, when we're prioritizing, when it makes sense, what are the essential services, really educating our kids is one of the highest. And I would hate to see schools close down again, small businesses close down again, because we were all unwilling to do our parts. I am going to be much more conscious about my decisions, and I'm begging us as a community to come together. We are stronger together. I think we will protect our kids, their educational opportunity and outcomes, but also our small businesses, our restaurants, our liquor stores, all of the different businesses that pay the sales tax revenue that help the city run. So please, let's not get fatigued and keep doing the right things so we can have a nice holiday season. So thank you.
Councilor Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to give a quick shout out to Public Works and Utilities, especially to Andrew Bliss, who was the person I ran into manning a tent on the Big Dry Creek Trail on Saturday at the 36 Bikeway intersection. Public Works and Utilities is starting a major sewer project along there, and it intersects with one of our absolute most popular bikeways and walking ways, the Big Dry Creek Trail, and had the opportunity to chat with Andrew. And he was out there to let the riders and walkers and skaters know that they're going to do their utmost to keep trail access available, minimize the detours, and keep people flowing along, which has been a great thing. Some days we almost need a traffic flagger at certain bike intersections. There are so many people out there enjoying our great trails. So great outreach on the staff's part. Appreciate that.
All right, Councilor Volt.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if this is the right place in the agenda to do this, but I'm wondering for public hearings later on this evening, public hearings and other business, if we want to have a discussion on D before we have a discussion on A, because item A is discussing the councilor bills, and it's an emergency order on COVID, but we get our COVID report later in the meeting. Does it make more sense to have the COVID report first prior to having a discussion on number A, or item A, which is city manager's emergency order on COVID? Does anyone else have a feel for that, or?
I would have a strong preference for that order that you have recommended. It feels like we'd be able to take a more educated decision on that. Is that possible, City
Yeah, give me a
Manager
second.
Tripp?
I'm trying to figure out where they see it. Mr. Tripp, in regards to the emergency ordinance, I think this is one you've already done. And Mr. Frankel, I think this is already in place. And we're just ratifying that. Am I correct? Mr. Frankel, you're muted, I think. Still nothing.
Mr. Frankel, it may be your headset. If you try the button on should be your right ear, it occasionally gets knocked around.
Sorry, Mr.
No,
Frankel.
not yet, sorry.
Mayor, I'd be happy to pinch hit. I think Dave would share with you that it's at your discretion if you'd like to adjust the agenda and you'd like to do the COVID report first. Dave, do I have that right? That would be up to you folks. And the COVID report is short. Basically, most of the COVID report is an update on the most recent data, particularly in Adams County, as to the numbers of cases.
Is there any objection to modifying the agenda, doing 8A after the COVID report? All right, Mr. Franklin, we'll see if we can get your voice piece fixed here quickly. All right, if we want to move on to that one, we'll come back to 8A or 10A when we get back to it. Right now, we're moving on. Are there any other comments from the council? All right, not seeing any, we'll move on to item 8A. This is a consent agenda. We have polled the council previously, and there has been no request to have anything removed from the consent agenda, so I will turn to the council. And Councilor Seymour, I believe you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that to adopt a resolution. My apologies. I move the City Council adopt the consent agenda items 8A through 8D.
Councilor Scully.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the adoption of the consent agenda. Ms. Parker, this is a roll call vote, if you would, please.
Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. Councilor Demott.
Yes.
Demott votes yes. Mayor Pro Tem Sights. I saw you mouth yes. Will you confirm? I didn't get any audio off of that, Mayor Pro Tem.
Audio.
Thank you.
Hear me?
Yes, thank you. Sights votes yes.
Yes.
Councilor Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. Councilor Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Councilor Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes. And Councilor Bowles.
Yes.
Bowles votes yes.
All right, thank you, Council. The consent agenda is approved on a 7-0 vote. Moving on to item 9, appointments and resignations. We have one item on the appointments. This is resolution number 37. Should I get back to where I Councilor Demott, I saw you come in on another one, but I'll go ahead and take you on item 9A, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to adopt resolution number 37, appointing Karen Goldman as the city's administrative protest hearing officer.
And Councilor Smith?
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the appointment of Karen Goldman as the city's administrative protest hearing officer for under resolution number 37. Is there any comments or questions by council? And Mr. Demott, Councilor Demott, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to point out this is directly one of the items I was talking about in my council comment time, that this group wants to protect the sanctity of the process of the recall. So therefore we are putting this in place so that if that goes through, that we're sure that the public's process is protected and, you know, there's no question that it's done correctly.
Other comments from council? I'm seeing none. Ms. Parker, this is item 9A, resolution 37. So roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Demott.
Yes.
Demott votes yes. Mayor Pro Tem Sights.
Yes.
Sights votes yes. Councilor Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. Councilor Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Councilor Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes. Councilor Bowles.
Yes.
Bowles votes yes. And Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. And Mr. Mayor, if I may offer a clarification, I'm not sure if City Attorney Frankel has resolved his sound issues, but we did want to point out that the bullet point here and in the packet states that the deadline to submit is Monday, November 2nd, 2020. And I'd like to just publicly clarify that the 60 days that is granted by the Charter Code and Colorado Revised Statutes actually falls on Saturday, October 31st. Last week, we notified the petition committee that is responsible for organizing this effort that in fact, should we allow those petitions to be turned in on the next business day, it could potentially create a challenge from any potential registered voter in the city of Westminster. And in order to give them every fair opportunity to have their petitions go through the complete process, we advised them that they would have to, in fact, give us their completed petitions by October 31st, and we intend to staff on that day in order to accommodate that. So I wanted to make that clear publicly, and also make note that we will be correcting the public record after this meeting now that we have stated so publicly. And that is all. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Mr. Frankel, you had a comment. Can you have your voice back now?
I hope so, Mr. Mayor. Am I audible now?
You are audible. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. I wanted to essentially second what Ms. Parker has just indicated. For the record, it's very important that those listening tonight understand that the deadline for submission of these petitions is October 31st, as Ms. Parker indicated, and the date that appears on the resolution will need to be corrected as, I believe, an error. So it would be my intention to notify you, now that you've passed this, of that intent to clarify that the deadline does fall on October 31st.
And we have confirmed that notification has been made to the people who filed the affidavits.
Yes, from my perspective, Ms. Parker transmitted an email, I understand, and if she has additional detail to provide, but I believe there was at least an email notification to the circulators. Ms. Parker?
That is correct, as well as a certified mail. So they have been notified. Not clear if the certified mail has actually been received at this point, but we will receive a receipt from the United States Post Service once they have received that hard copy as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next item, going on to item 10B. Councilor Scully.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to authorize the city manager to execute an amended license agreement in substantially the same form as the original agreement with the Allen Ditch Company to construct a concrete irrigation pipe in an amount not to exceed $322,955 plus an additional $32,295 in contingency. When added to the original agreement amount of $50,000, the total authorized expenditure for this agreement is in an amount not to exceed $405,250.
Councilor Vols.
I second the motion.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Councilor Smith, you had a question.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Mr. Tripp, I just would like more information and or clarification. There's a bullet point in our packet that says, under terms of the proposed amendment agreement, the company will administer the construction contract and the city will bear the cost. Can you walk me through why the city would bear the cost?
Certainly, I'll bring the department head and staff to the podium with me here to answer your question, Councilor Smith. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Dave Downing. I think I can answer that question, but since the project manager is in attendance tonight, that's Seth Plass, I'll introduce him so in case there's any follow-up questions.
Mr. Plass, if you would.
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate the opportunity to provide some additional information on this item. Seth Plass, Capital Projects Administrator for Community Development Department. The main reason why city would bear the cost is this work would have needed to be done as part of the Sheridan Boulevard multimodal transportation improvement project. Regardless of whether the Allen Ditch administers the construction contract or the city does. There's multiple points in the proposed new alignment of the US 36 bikeway that crosses the current open channel Allen Ditch, and not only to provide better options for that trail alignment, but also from a safety standpoint, it the project team and the Allen Ditch felt it made sense to pipe this irrigation ditch.
Okay, thank you. That makes more sense, and it seems like it's more cost effective and cost sharing if we're doing it this way. Would that be an accurate statement?
The cost savings really comes from the timing of the construction. So the Allen Ditch shuts down their irrigation ditch in the fall for the winter and reopens it to irrigation flows in the spring. So the window between the window that we're in now between October and March is really the best timing to perform construction work of this nature. You don't have to worry about diverting irrigation water, and which would add a additional cost to the project. So it made sense from not only a cost savings perspective, but it also made sense since the Allen Ditch will own this infrastructure and maintain this infrastructure, that they could administer the contract to their expectations.
Got it. Thank you so much for your clear explanation of this. That really helps me understand this and helps provide more solid grounding as far as the vote. So thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Other comments or questions from council? All right, moving on, Ms. Parker, this is item 10B. This is a roll call vote, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Sites.
Yes.
Sites votes yes. Counselor Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. Counselor Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Counselor Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes. Counselor Bowles.
Yes.
Bowles votes yes. Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. And Counselor Demott.
Yes.
Demott votes yes.
All right, thank you, council. On item 10B, we are a 7-0 vote in favor. Moving on to item 10C. This is a sole source contract award. I will turn to Counselor Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move based on the recommendations of the city manager to find that the public interest would be best served by awarding a sole source contract in the amount of $401,365 to the firm of BKD LLP for independent professional auditing services for the city's annual financial audit for the fiscal year 2020, with an option to renew for 4 years, subject to annual appropriation, plus a project contingency of $7,000 per year for each year the contract is renewed, for a total authorized expenditure of $436,365.
Counselor Smith, would you like to do the second? Then I'll come back to you for your question.
I think Counselor Scully was in the queue for that, but I can do it. What would you like?
Just do the second, if you will, for right now.
Second.
Okay. I have a motion and second for those who have a question. And Counselor Smith, I see you have a question, and I see Counselor Bowles and, wait a minute. Hang a minute, I just got a whole bunch of names popped in. Let me make sure I've got the right one. So Counselor Seymour, you're the motion maker. I'm trying to get back to where yours came in because everybody hit it about the same time. Counselor Seymour, you're the first maker. Counselor Smith, you made the second, and you also had a question. So I'll come back to you and then I'll follow along with the others that are in the chat box to go ahead with your question.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So with this, I understand where we're coming from with a sole source. Is there, I know in the alternatives, there is an option to reduce the contract. Is there a way that we can maybe do 1 year? Because we are in a 1-year cycle. I understand that this 5-year contract would bring us, it would have brought us into a 4-year biannual budget cycle. But since we're only focusing on our one-year budget cycle for 2021. Is that possible that we could go through just a one-time contract with them? My other question is, while I understand a sole source, do we have any indication that there's any other competitive bids other than BKD?
Mr. Tripp.
Thank you, Counselor. Yes, thank you, Counselor Smith. The second part of that question asked, I think I'll bring Tammy Hitchens on, Finance Director, because I think the core really is around this sole source issue. I would say that if we agreed with the selection, then I would think that Tammy will probably tell you that we'd like to have some consistency in that role for a period of time. But Tammy, would you go ahead and address both of these issues?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem and Council, the reason this is before you tonight is at the conclusion of our audit this year, which as was done completely remotely, the audit firm of BKD, which we've actually had for 10 years, and this was the conclusion of their 10th year, they called us and offered to extend it for 2 years, and the 2 years were to remain solid this year at 76,200 for the 2020 audit, which is actually done in 2021, and then a 2% increase for the following year. And so based on their unsolicited proposal, if you will, we talked about it. We thought it sounded like a good idea. It's very fair. BKD did win the award last time that we did it. They had the lowest bid at that point, and to not be increasing it, we felt was a very fair offer from them. As mentioned, we do like the consistency of having these 5-year contracts, and so that is why we went ahead and did it for the 1 year with the option to renew for 4 years. So the question about whether or not we could just do 1 year, we would probably have to go back to BKD because their original proposal was 2 years, one at the same price, and then one with a 2% increase.
Okay. And have we even remotely entertained other bids as far as this type of work?
Not for this current contract. We entertained several bids the last time we went through this process 5 years ago.
Okay. Okay. That's all of my questions right now. Thank you.
Councilor Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I want to just ask, so as long as I can remember, our city has received or been awarded a Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. Is BKD involved in that, and how, and have they helped us achieve that award regularly, and how? Thank you.
Yes, so yes, we have received that award since I believe the mid-'80s. And every auditor, in all honesty, that we've had throughout the years helps us to attain that. BKD has many governmental clients, and so they have a large number of clients that they help through this process each year, and looking at what we did, if we get a comment, what we can do to improve what we need to improve on. And in addition, they have many folks within their firm who are individually on the review committees. So they, unrelated to their audit work as individuals, they volunteer to review other CAFRs. And so they have firsthand knowledge of the program, and so they are able to help us out through that process as well.
That's very good. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Councilor Scully.
I did not have a question, sir, but thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Sites.
Thank you. And I want to say a special thank you to Councilor Smith, because I always do appreciate questioning sole source, no bid contracts. And I think it's important. So thank you for doing that. I did just want to make a comment as somebody who's worked or has been on council when BKD has done work for us in the past and presented to us. And while obviously our finance department has a much deeper and real working relationship, every time they have presented to council, I have been incredibly impressed at the level of thoroughness, fairness, kind of this is what's coming ahead. And I cannot think of the woman's name, and I feel really shamed because I've met her quite a few years in a row now. But I really appreciate the duty of care and how clear and succinctly she explains everything to us. So I'm going to be supporting this because I'm happy to continue that relationship.
Other comments from council? One of the things that, and just to be clear, this was not a solicitation, but was an unsolicited proposal that came in from the existing contractor for an extension. So even though this may have been coming up next year, I think it was a good point that we all understand that this is not something that was bid, and it's not uncommon to have unsolicited proposals come in for work for cities and counties as well. So I don't see any particular issue with this, but we've had experience with the firm. The fact that they're willing to do it this next year at the same price with no increase, and then only a 2% increase in the second year. That's a pretty minimal increase in what we're looking at. And there's still the opportunity at the end of that second year to go back out and do a new formal proposal if there's a need to, which perhaps we'll wait for staff to make that decision. Are there any other comments before we call the vote? Ms. Parker, we're on item 10C. This is a roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Counselor Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. Counselor Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Counselor Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes. Counselor Bowles.
Yes.
Bowles votes yes. Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. Counselor DeMott.
Yes.
DeMott votes yes. And Mayor Pro Tem Sites.
Yes.
Sites votes yes.
Thank you, council. That concludes the business items except for item 10A, which we'll come back to after we have the COVID report. Mr. Tripp, if you and staff would go ahead and lead us into the updates on the COVID report. But before you do, let me remind some of council was on the call this morning, some weren't. But this morning, when we talked about the infection rates that we were seeing in Adams and Jefferson County, when I read the report this morning to the chamber and to their audience, Adams County was at 300.6. That was at 10:30, 10:45 this morning. At 6 o'clock tonight, they're at 305. Our numbers went up even more during the day. And Jefferson County has done the same thing, another increase from this morning to this afternoon. And we had a public notice in a media event this afternoon with the mayor of Denver that their numbers are going up significantly, and they're already starting to look at the issue of reversing what they've done for openings because the numbers are jumping up the way they are. We are in a mandate from CDPHE, as I discussed this morning, with Adams County to provide a mitigation plan, which is being formulated this week and has to be turned in before the end of the week. My concern is that we are seeing our numbers exponentially continue to go up. If we hit the 350 mark and we stay there for 2 weeks, we're looking at the potential of a new stay-at-home order in Adams County. And that will affect us greatly. But I also have a concern that I'd like you to try to address, if you can, any plans that we have dealing with city facilities or city actions in light of these greatly increased numbers over the last 2 weeks. We've seen over a double increase in our infection rates in the past 3 weeks. And this number just doesn't seem to be stopping. So if you have any input on that and where you think we are, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, members of City Council. I'm going to, I think I'll start tonight with giving you your data report. It's a little different than we had last week at the request of the Mayor Pro Tem, and I think other councilors wanted to see the same additional information. We brought information from previous reports forward and combined it now with the dial information we presented the last couple of weeks. And Sarah Borgers is here, who's Water Resources and Quality Manager, to present that this evening to you. After that's done, I'll come back up and I'll invite Barbara Opie to join me, and we'll speak a little bit about future uses of City Hall and some concerns that we have based on the data that we have right now and just the logistics and how that's all coming together. So if you would, Sarah, would you come up and Matt, help her with the slides here. She's going to present that COVID data for this evening. Thank you. I'll be back in a little bit.
Thank you, Mr. Tripp. Mayor and City Council. This is Sarah Borgers in Public Works and Utilities. I'll be sitting in for Director Kirschbaum tonight. As Don mentioned, the data is situated a little bit differently in this evening's report compared to what you've seen in the past. We were looking for a way to be a little more succinct with the data that we were sharing and particularly focus in on the metrics that the state's using to determine each county's designation. So with that, Mr. Williams, if you could change the slide for me. Thank you. So this is a graphic we've all seen before. It was developed by the state recently, and it shows the three metrics that the state's currently using to decide how counties are allocated to different levels. On the left-hand side of the chart, from top to bottom, the first one is the number of new cases, represented as the number of cases per 100,000 people over the last 2 weeks, followed by the number of tests that come back positive for COVID-19, represented as a percentage, that percent positivity, followed by hospital admissions. And generally speaking, the hospital admission rate is deemed to be stable if there are no more than 2 admissions on any day over the last 14 days. So as an example, a county at a safer level 2 would be expected to have a case rate between 75 and 175 new cases per 100,000 people. And they would be expected to have a positivity rate less than 10% and have stable hospital admissions. Mr. Williams, next slide, please. So this is how we are hoping to provide information to council moving forward. There is a lot of stuff going on this slide, so I'm just going to step us through it. Before I go into the details, I'd like to note that the numbers shown here are for last Friday and are summarized from the state, Jefferson County Public Health, and Tri-County Health websites. We used Friday because sometimes weekend numbers aren't always caught up, and we wanted to make sure we were using good data from each of those sites. So along the left-hand side of this chart are the same 3 metrics shown in the previous slide that the state is using. And the columns across the top, of course, are the state, Adams County, and Jefferson County. So in that first row, you can see that Adams and Jefferson County are both at a stage 2 officially. And as we get down into the numbers, you'll see that Adams County is really starting to set up in a stage 3 situation. So the next row down shows the number of new cases per 100,000 people over the last 2 weeks. And just below each of those values are the change in the values in the last 7 days, going from last Friday to the Friday before. And that can just help show some trends of what is happening with this data. So working across that row, the statewide number of cases as of Friday was 142 and is continuing to increase. Adams County, of course, is the one of concern right now. It continues to see a significant rise in cases. This chart shows 280 per 100,000. That was as of Friday, and as the mayor mentioned, that's now sitting around 305 right now. So with level 2 set to be between 75 and 175 cases, Adams County is well into the level 3 category in this metric and approaching the stay-at-home metric that's set at 350 per 100,000. Jefferson County is increasing as well with 126 cases per 100,000 as of Friday, and that was an increase of about 17 cases from the previous week. The next row down shows percent positive rates for the state and both of the counties. And across the board, these percent positive rates are increasing. But again, it's Adams County that seems to be standing out among this group. The last row is hospital admissions. And again, the goal here is to have no more than 2 admissions in a single day over the last 2 weeks at the county level. Statewide, there's been somewhat of an increase in total hospital admissions. However, the percent of beds occupied by COVID patients is relatively consistent at 4%. We've included that as an additional data point here, and if it's helpful, we'll continue to include that. Adams County admissions rates are high, sitting at 9. However, that 9 admissions in a day happened back on September 29th, and it's now down in the 3 to 5 admissions per day range more recently. The Jefferson County numbers, you'll notice an asterisk by it. Jefferson County reports their cumulative weekly admissions rather than daily admissions. So our data is a little more fuzzy here. So what you're seeing here is an averaged daily number rather than an actual daily admission number. So those are the details. Stepping back to look at the big picture, Adams County rate of new cases is on a steep rise right now, with numbers squarely in the stage 3 area and continuing to increase. If last week's rate of increase continues, Adams County will be at the stay-at-home level by next week. One mitigating factor here is that hospitalization rates are above planned goals, but at least for the moment are not increasing. I think at this point, that's all of the information I have to share. Certainly, I am open to questions, or if council would like to see this in a different format, we are open to that as well. Thank you.
Mr. Tripp, do you have any other comments before we open it up to council?
Well, I do, but I think Councilor Seymour has specifically asked to make some comments immediately after the data report, and I'm happy to have you do that, Councilor,
Right.
and then I'll make my comments after.
Councilor Seymour, go ahead. Then I'll catch the other council members right after him.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Tripp. I thank Ms. Borger for that report, because it included some of the data that I wanted to point out too, is that we seem not to be adapting to the data from a state or tri-county standpoint as we see changes and what we've learned and learn every day that is new. And so I thought it was absolutely critical to point out the fact as far as daily admissions on a 7-day rolling have plunged since we talk about a factor steady of being at 2. Well, our peak in August of admissions on a daily rolling basis was 1.061. We are now at, as the October 11th report, we dropped that in half. So the daily rolling admissions, so our hospitalization, we've done what we needed to do. Right now they're at 0.531 and heading down towards our neighbors in Arapahoe County. So I thought that was critical. And I also appreciate the fact that our percentage of beds occupied by COVID patients. And so this is about what our capacity is in managing capacity. I think we all agree that this is a highly contagious disease. And eventually, if we do not have a vaccine, everyone will have contracted it at one point or another, unless they live in a bubble. And so 4.1% of the beds being used for COVID patients, that goes, if we look at a spike back in July, right after our 4th of July concerns, our spike was at 5% of beds being used for COVID patients. So it's critically important that we look at these front-end numbers. The front-end numbers are not correlating to what our back-end numbers and our concern on that. And that may very well be is in public places, people are doing those things to keep our economy open. And that's the key. Our economy must stay open. We, as Westminster residents, we have, and this is from Tri-County's dashboard, Westminster residents on average on observation days of people wearing masks, and this is not admittedly, Tri-County admits this too. This is not scientific, but they're going out and they're doing these. We're looking at 97.5% mask wearing on that. Whether you agree with masks or don't agree with masks, people are wearing them in facilities. But what I don't understand is we've hit this panic button, and we're actually looking at reducing business capacity by 25%, which will kill our businesses. And I find that discussion amazing. And if we look at the back end, it'd be interesting if we could find the data on, because Tri-County last week made a statement in that, and I believe the mayor has something along this line too, is that school infections are traced back not to the schools, but to private gatherings. So how can we punish businesses? I'd like to know what our infection rate has been through this entire thing for our grocery workers who have had to stick it out and be on the front line. I'd like to know what our infection rate at restaurants and those kind of facilities. That's the true public gathering part of this. And I think if we in any way, shape, or form are compliant with a 25% decrease in our businesses, then that would be a shame. I apologize for my passion, but our businesses can't handle that. So thank you.
Counselor, excuse me, Counselor Demott.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Counselor Seymour, for pointing out some of those data points. I know that we don't have a lot of control over what the county and CDPHE does. However, I do think we have a responsibility to at least advocate on behalf of our businesses. I am curious about how much of this infection spike has been in our city, being that we're in pretty wide spread counties that have many cities in them. So just because those counties are going up doesn't particularly mean the city of Westminster is going up, nor does it mean that we're not doing what we need to do to try to prevent the spread of the virus. At some point, like I suggested 2 weeks ago, we need to be able to reevaluate as a state, in my opinion. I don't know, we have to have some method to advocate for that for our businesses. I've as early as today, or as recent as today, the WHO is now having their doctors saying that lockdowns aren't really their main line of defense. I mean, and that's the WHO. Dr. David Nabarro from the WHO said, "We in the World Health Organization do not advocate lockdowns as primary means of a control of the virus." He goes on to talk about, that part of it is to make sure that you're not exhausting your hospitals and healthcare workers. And if we go back to March, that is what we were sold this on. That's what we all agreed to, is we didn't know what this virus was going to do. I agree it's highly contagious, and for some folks it is absolutely devastating. But a large percent of our citizens are able to weather this. And I'm not saying that we don't take it serious, but at some point we need to do something else. And we can't just go back and close business down, in my opinion. I like many of us, when we went through this in March, we very much were said, we need to do what we need to do. Nobody liked it. But at some point, we can't destroy the businesses who have survived this far. I agree with the mayor that we can continue to advocate for masks. We can continue to advocate for, washing your hands, don't do things that you don't need to do. But I really do think, as a state, at least, I don't know what the rest of the country, there's been varying degrees of how they handle this. I do think we need to reevaluate, and however we can advocate for that for the city of Westminster, I think that we should do it, because I am afraid if you lock us down again, I don't know that we'll have businesses left at the end of the year. And I don't think that that's going to be healthy for anyone.
Councilor Scully.
Yes, thank you. Actually, most of my questions were answered, but I wanted you to repeat one question, and that was the hospital beds. Can you once again just because it was said at the end and I felt like it was kind of said quickly and then moved on. What is our hospital bed status? How many beds do we have available at this time?
Sarah, do you have any information on that, on the details?
Yes, ma'am, Counselor Scully. So that 4% hospital beds is the amount of beds currently taken up by COVID patients. And that 4% has not changed from last week. If you give me just a few minutes, I could find more information on that. I see Counselor Seymour with his hand raised, but that's the piece that I know about that 4% right there.
So we haven't seen an increase yet, but with an increase in rate of COVID, there is a chance we will see an increase, possibly.
I would say that could happen. I'm not a public health expert.
No, I get it. And yeah, I was on the Tri-County call last Thursday or Wednesday. Days all kind of run together. And so some of this was talked about there as well. The other question I have is, do we have any idea why we're seeing a spike again? Is it, last time we saw a spike, we could correlate it to July 4th. Do we have any idea what we're correlating this to that might help us? Like if we lived in an area that had a university sitting in the middle of it, we could say, well, it was the university, and we could maybe work with that information. But it just feels random, and it's hard to understand where it's coming from. So that makes it really hard to make a decision on whether or not we need to move to another stage and possibly shut down. And I don't want to see us shut down either. I understand the devastation that caused to our businesses and our economic situation. So I would rather us not do that, but I'm not willing to put the public health at risk. So I'm just curious if we have a way that we could correlate it to something.
Councilor Scully, let me try to give you an update, and Councilor Seymour, I'm not ignoring you. So if you go to the public health report that we saw just last week in both Adams and Jefferson County, our biggest spikes are not in businesses, as Councilor Seymour pointed out, and so did Councilor DeMott. We talked about that this morning. The big inputs of where the big numbers are coming from that they can trace them back to is in small and large group gatherings, which means people are doing things socially at their homes or at other events, but not necessarily at restaurants. Now, doesn't mean that restaurants don't have an infection or haven't been correlated to some, but not near the spikes that we've seen in small and large group gatherings. And that was consistent across both Adams and Jefferson County. That seems to be where they're drawing the biggest numbers. Let me go back to the comments that Councilor DeMott and Seymour made earlier. When the decision of how we are going to measure these metrics was set up, we had a representative from Jefferson and Adams County both, Mayor Williams out of Jefferson County and Commissioner Odorizio from Adams County. Both made the comment when the state was setting this up that they wanted to see them use hospitalization rates as part of the criteria. The state chose not to do that. So when they go and they measure what stage you're in, they're only using two primary numbers: the infection rate numbers and the positivity rate numbers. Both Dr. Johnson and Dr. Douglas have asked again to CDPHE to reconsider how they put the metrics together. And to date, I haven't talked to either one of them today, but as of last week, the state has not done that. And it does not seem that they are open to going back and reconfiguring how they measure this. So this is not a Westminster issue by itself. We are following the mandates coming down to us through the health departments from the state. We don't get to choose what we get to comply with because these come down as state mandates. But we are required to comply with those. As I said this morning, there is absolutely no way I want to see one business have to go back to a half of 50%. But we won't have a choice in it. If we don't get our numbers down, we are going to be faced with the issue of living to a mandate coming to us through CDPHE. Our best option right now is when the mitigation plan is submitted later this week, that information gets out to the public through every means possible, that this is where we're at. We will have about a 2-week window to get our numbers down. And if we don't, they're going to lock us into stage 3. That's immediately hit. By the time, as Sarah pointed out, by the time we get to that situation, we're probably going to be in the numbers that say stay at home. We would then have to submit a new mitigation plan to try to see what we're going to do there. And I think our numbers are going to continue to go up because just from this morning, we saw them jump another 5%.
Yeah, I agree with you. We saw a jump just from Thursday to Saturday, and it was a significant jump by like 20. So, yeah.
Councilor Seymour, I
thank
had your hand up on a clarification I think you wanted to make, Ms. Borgers, and then Councilor Seitz, I have you next.
Well, I have the Tri-County site up on my data research, and it was a question that was brought up by Councilor Scully as far as capacity of beds. This has actually jumped up significantly because the hospitals are back to doing elective surgery, and that's why you have to balance out the number of beds being used for COVID patients. And then, because right now in Adams County, and even with the great number of hospitals we have here, inpatient beds capacity is at 86%, but 4.1% of that is for COVID. So it would be a matter of a shift on ICU or inpatient beds. The hospitals, in order to make any money, have to have people in ICU beds because they've been doing surgeries. And so they've ramped that back up again. If they had to and they had an influx, then I would assume they would do what they did before and just stop all elective surgery and free up that capacity. That's an opinion, but those are where they're at.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I appreciate your clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I actually have some questions real quick. My understanding of the way these stages work is there's an asymmetry to them. So in order to move up a stage, you only have to have numbers in one of the 3 categories. But then if you don't, if you get put in there, your mitigation plan doesn't work, you get put there, you actually have to hit all 3 categories to go back down. Is that accurate?
What do you mean by 3 categories? You talking about hospitalizations as well?
On the call on Thursday with Dr. Douglas, and I see I see Councilor Scully nodding her head. Yes, that was stated that all 3 of those categories, the new cases, the percent positive, and the hospital admission, all 3 of those need to be within the next stage down. So it's a weird asymmetric thing. You can move up easily, but it's hard to get moved back down. So I will just say I agree with everybody who has said we need to do everything we can to not move into that next stage. And I am very hopeful that the county and Tri-County has put together a strong mitigation plan that will be approved and actually moves the needle, because I don't want to see businesses close again. I do not want to see our local economy grind to a halt. So that said, I really think we need to take this seriously, and in all of our forums, remind people not to relax. I know most of the folks on this call were on that Thursday call, and one of the things they said, and the mayor has already brought this up, is they've done the contract tracing. This isn't from schools opening back up. This isn't from people going to restaurants and eating there. This is truly from us letting our guard down and having those, those gatherings. And I think a lot of people here know someone personally that had a huge ripple effect of folks in the community that had to get tested. And that really should open our eyes how quickly things can become super spreaders. And so you know, I know I didn't allow staff to answer, and if I'm wrong on the asymmetry thing, please someone jump in and let me know, but I'm pretty sure it's harder to get out of a stage than it is to get into it. Is that correct, Ms. Borgers, or are you aware of that?
That is in line with what I have heard as well.
So I'm going to say, in light of this, and especially as we're trying to get an approval of the mitigation plan, should we practice what we're all preaching here and maybe defer for 2 more weeks the opening of City Hall to prevent unnecessary exposure, so places like restaurants, so places like schools can stay open? I'm just really concerned about knowing that we're heading into 3 and asking people to start congregating to do public comment in person. Is that responsible on us, and is that helping push the needle in the right direction? And I'm concerned it's not. I want to make something really clear too. This is a state decision. This isn't the council's decision on whether or not we get moved into stage 3 or at stay at home. So all we can do is try to encourage our residents and ourselves to make best practices so we don't get pushed into the next level. That's not something this council would be agreeing to. It is just the rules. It is what happens. So I want to make sure that's clear as well. And then I'm just going to say on a very personal note, it is really easy to look at statistics and numbers and say, well, that doesn't seem like that many people. Those are real human beings. And so I just really want us to recognize, while obviously all of us, and there's many different diseases that we all are potentially exposed to every day, I do think that there's a certain level of reasonable risk, and then there's a certain level of being unreasonable. And I just want to make sure we don't send mixed signals, mock the kind of hard-fought compromises that have allowed our businesses to open, but really encourage people to follow them so that we do not close again. I really think we all on this council are leaders, and we have a responsibility to set a good example and ask people to do their part and to also follow that ourselves. So I guess those are my points more than questions. I would think it would be helpful for us all with trending, if perhaps, if it's not too difficult, if the numbers could be split so we could see previous week and this week. So for instance, next week, if it's 260, we know at least we're going in the right direction. I guess you have that actually underneath, so never mind. With the up arrow in the 40s, sorry, took me a second. You already have it, so never mind. This is perfect. And I'd love to see my colleagues see what they think about potentially postponing for 2 weeks or tabling for 2 weeks the reopening of City Hall.
All right, I've got 4 people in the queue right now, so I'm going to take in the order that you're in. Councilor Bowles.
All right, thank you. Yeah, a lot's been said, so I'll try not to be redundant, but I do agree that we have to do everything possible to keep our businesses open. It's critical, and I think a full shutdown would be disastrous. So whatever we can do to support mitigation and efforts to get the numbers going the right way. Right now, they're absolutely going the wrong way. And so my question then would be, what meetings do we have, or what kinds of efforts do we have here at city government where we don't need to meet in person? If we don't need to meet, we need to do what we can to not meet. It's the transmission of this virus is through these meetings. So if it's not happening in school, there's other places where it's not happening as much that we know of, but we do know it's happening in small groups. I would ask our city staff, city leadership, are there meetings that we could bypass and do online and not do in-person meeting right now for the next at least couple of weeks of this mitigation? So I would agree with what I was going to make, the same exact point that Mayor Pro Tem Seitz made earlier. Slow down on opening and not do in-person meetings, slow down on opening City Hall for now, because this is where the transmission is happening in these type of small meetings. Maybe we're better and we help our businesses by not continuing to add to that. So I would like us to consider that. I would like staff maybe to weigh in if there are meetings that they think certainly we're doing now that we don't need to do. That would be my comment. Thank you.
Councilor Demott.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the things that I should have been clear about that I'm trying to get at too is where Westminster is. Throughout time, I've continuously asked to see where Westminster is, and we see Adams and Jefferson. I know we have some sort of Westminster numbers because we get them every 8 days or so, but it would be nice to actually see how we're trending. Like I could pull up the last numbers and see we were up 156 cases between September 30th and October 8th, but I don't know what that is in a trend. We continuously see the trends here, which they're good, but I really want to know how is Westminster performing, because you know we're only in control of our area as far as as what we do. So I'd like to understand that, because that really helps us dictate some of these things if they're needed. The term that we are leaders, I understand to some extent. There are some things that the citizens expect us to lead on as far as leading the organization in the city. But we're also just as much here to represent them and make sure that we're not causing undue burden on businesses and residents and their freedoms. I know that this has been a strange year for that, and I understand that sacrifices had to have been made, and I give accolades to the citizens of both the city, the state, and this country that they've been willing to do those things to serve their fellow man and woman. I think that's important, but I still would like a clear picture of what exactly is happening in our city, so that if you're saying we need to stall the opening of City Hall, great, but show me the data that says that in the city. I'm not arguing it. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I actually think that Mayor Pro Tem Seitz and Councilor Voles have a good point if that's what is happening inside the city of Westminster. And I understand that the counties at large, that's what we're seeing, but do we have an idea that that's actually, our trends are going in the wrong way to the extent that we need to start pivoting in the city? Again, I agree with you guys. If this is what we have to do in order to protect our businesses, let's do what we need to do. But I want to know that we're working off of real data that is relevant to this city.
Councilor Scully, I have you up next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thank you for that, Councilor Demott. I think that is important that we know exactly where we are with our city. I think it would impact our decision. I also agree with Mayor Pro Tem Seitz and Councilor Voles that we need to be leaders and we need to think about our own actions and how we are leading by example. I would not be opposed to delaying our opening for 2 more weeks. It's 2 more weeks, and to me it's small in comparison to what we've gone through. I would be interested to see how other cities are handling this. Where are they with their meetings, and how are the counties handling it? Where are they with their meetings? Do they meet in person? Do they still meet virtually? Were they meeting in person and going back to virtual? Are they going to continue? I'm curious, and I think that would also be a beneficial thing to explore and look at.
Councilor Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too agree with Mayor Pro Tem Seitz that we should lead. And unless I heard it wrong on the Tri-County call last week, that the infection spikes from the ones that they've been able to trace are coming from family gatherings. People, family units, friends, neighborhood parties, those kind of +10 gatherings. And so I truly believe that we can show our residents and our businesses how to properly open. Either lead or also follow the example of the myriad of businesses that have now been operating for a substantial number of time under safety protocols that either meet the needs of their employees to protect them first and foremost, and to protect their customers. And it seems to have been extremely successful from that standpoint. I look at all the businesses around me and the activity that's been going on for 90+ days now, and how they're managing that and properly doing that. Meetings, to the best of my knowledge, is what we're talking about as council. can set an example of how we're going to utilize the facilities that we have prepared for us, how we're able to distance, and how we're able to spread people out. I don't believe there was a plan yet in place to allow citizens in quite yet, so that we can make sure that the facilities that we have are correct for council. So I think we can lead. I think we can set an example. We can set an example to our entire community. And I think we do that by showing them how you can move safely through this in a controlled way with those in place. Thank you.
Councilor Smith.
Thank you. Gosh, Councilor Seymour, your thoughts on that are put very eloquently and much to what I've been thinking hearing this fruitful discussion on this topic. It seems like we're all in agreement that keeping businesses open are important, keeping people safe are important. However, I'm not necessarily for slowing down and removing and reversing and going backwards. And it feels much that way. It feels like that we're moving closer to a potential stay at home, and I think that would be extremely detrimental. We have seen, as Councilor Seymour had stated, there are good protocols in place. I've been reporting to work since day one in a massive transit industry, and we've had minimal number of cases with employees. So that involves tracking and temperature checks and the whole mix of what is required to keep people safe. And so I think there are effective ways to do that. However, I feel if we are moving towards keeping things virtual, it's not moving the needle forward on where we need to be and showing that we can do this in a leadership position to show we can do it safely. Not to belabor the point here, but there are certain ways to do it. And I truly believe that, and this is part of the reason why I wanted to meet sooner in September, so that we could get together and really hone in as a council. If this were to happen, which it seems like it's kind of moving that way, we'd already have this in place on how to effectively approach this. So to me, I think that we should continue moving forward, putting our step forward to work together as a council, and then look at how we introduce people back into City Hall. But I absolutely believe and have seen firsthand that it can be done.
Are there any other comments before we turn to the staff? All right, Mr. Tripp, let's get your.
Yes. Well, I really appreciate all the comments, and I was listening intently. I've got probably more things I'm going to say right now than I would have. Let me a couple of housekeeping things. Councilor DeMott, we'll pursue Westminster data and update on that. And if I can get something to the full group of you tomorrow, we'll do that and try to be as specific around the information we have with our city. I know you know this. I know all of you know this. We're still required to subject ourselves to what Adams County and Tri-County does as a region, but I think it's a fair question, and I think we're all interested to see that. So we can aggregate that between Jefferson and Adams. We'll do the best job we can with that. That's number one. Secondly, to all of you, at the very top of the list for the staff is keeping businesses operating, keeping people in jobs, keeping people able to continue to have commerce. It's a really, really important thing, and we're on tipping point, and we're all really concerned about that. We are absolutely advocating. We are participating. I was sent today around 12:30 a copy of the mitigation strategy and plan that Adams County created in a few days. I was asked by 4 o'clock to provide a response to that. I sent that to all the expert people in our organization who provided comments. I sent those to to the county manager today at about 4:30. I'm happy to share my comments that I provided to him on the basis of the staff, but it was staff and economic development and financial sustainability in a number of areas that had questions about the things that were being requested. I would say overall, it's an impressive request, and it is around the idea that we want to keep our businesses operating. But we are needing to participate in this process because of the numbers of cases that we have and the spike that we are having, we're in great jeopardy of immediately going into stage 3 and before very long going into stay at home. And of course, if you look at the numbers and the impact that's just not an acceptable place for us to move to. So we are really very anxious about doing whatever's necessary in the short run to not only stop the increases of cases to the extent that we can in the measurement area that we're required to report, and to show the state that as a county, we're taking this matter really seriously. So to the business of City Hall and the council meetings, I have, a report I guess I'd like to provide on that. Deputy City Manager Barbara Opie is here to talk in great specifics about what she's gone through to put all of this together. But here's the opinion I would offer you. We opened City Hall today to employees only as a first week step to become acclimated by bringing people back in the building. We're doing it at a 30% level. That is frankly, at a level that I'm very comfortable with. And it was a day of great apprehension by the people that came in the building. I greeted them as they came in this morning. I talked to a number of them this morning. I think we'll get used to that work, and I think it will get better as we move forward. I have to tell you, it is not gaining us one bit of anything that we don't have today. In fact, for many people who've become accustomed to telecommuting, it was a bit awkward today to be in an office and telecommute, essentially, because we're not doing in-person meetings in conference rooms. We're continuing to use the go-to meeting function so we don't expose each other unnecessarily and to get our work done in that way. And of course, the meeting world outside of the city is the same way right now. So I'm very comfortable at the 30% level. And I'm very comfortable in bringing citizens back into the building with 30% of the people in the building to deliver service to them where that's needed. And we plan to do that beginning, I believe, next week or the week after. Barbara can speak to that. We have temperature check stations. We have good protocols in place. And so I don't have a recommendation that we should claw back from that at this point. I think we have to watch the numbers. The only reason that you do that would be to be able to say that we've taken another step to reduce. But I'm not prepared tonight, without more information moving forward, to say that we should go backwards on any of those things. The council meetings are a challenging matter for us. It is your decision. I want to say a couple things. When we discussed starting the council meetings back in October, the concept that we had was that we would start, as we are next week, a study session that were meetings without the public, and we would acclimate and we would become accustomed and find best practices along the way to begin to actually admit people from outside the council and the staff into the building to publicly comment. We are breaking the ground on this issue. There is no one else that's doing this except the city of Arvada. The other councils that are meeting together in the room, but they're continuing with the the virtual options for the public. The same types of things that we're doing with people sending in comments and recording comments, but in some other jurisdictions, they're actually have technology and taking advantage of opportunities for people to speak live, but as a virtual participant in the meeting. I think we have a possibility of doing that. Barbara has been working on how to make the face-to-face meetings that were planned for October 26th, meaning that people come into the council chambers, make that work. Frankly, she's frustrated about how that's coming together. We don't have great confidence if we have large numbers of people attending, that we're prepared to handle that, and we're concerned about that issue, very frankly. But it is your meeting, and the request that I have of you is that you would consider allowing us to start for a longer period of time with you coming in to City Hall to conduct your meetings, but finding options for virtual participation by those folks from the public who want to participate in our meeting. And I can tell you that you'll have staff members who are going to be virtual for these meetings for health reasons. And so some of the people that you might believe that you'll see from staff will not be able to participate in the room because they've been told not to because of their own health conditions. So I'll handle that. I'll take care of that, and we'll have backup people to serve you. But I would ask that you consider delaying for a bit and allow us to start slowly to have your meetings with just you and the staff actually in the room for a while. Barbara, is there anything that you want to, and before I turn it back to comment to those things, I'd like you to come on, Barbara, and talk about whatever you'd like to say about this, and also to speak about the meeting next week, the study session meeting that we plan to have, and give them a little background there. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and Council, for the opportunity. Obviously, there's been a lot going into getting City Hall reopened and those variables. Candidly, I think trying to plan for an in-person council meeting is probably way more challenging than any of the other facility reopenings, as we are trying to make sure that we are socially distancing, providing for flow, ensuring that people have the opportunity as they desire to. I am one of probably 20 at least staff members that have been working on this regularly. Michelle Parker, actually city clerk, has been really the lead in pulling this together. I've probably been more the pain in her side of pulling up different details and ideas as we've been working through it. So as we originally anticipated, with the reopening of City Hall with a limited re-entry of staff, obviously not open to the public at this time. It is partially just to get staff comfortable with coming back in, with us making sure that there are the protocols in place and if there's modifications that need to be made. We recognize that the majority of our employee population actually has been working in person, whether they're public safety, the water treatment plants, wastewater treatment plants, parks teams out in the field, that they have been doing so very effectively, and we've been very pleased with the efforts that have been made to continue to do so. City Hall obviously is one of those scenarios that the county does identify as, it's an office space where it's an enclosed area. And so again, those sensitivities to how many people you have in the space. One of the things that we've been really trying to work with is the advice that we were getting from Adams County and Tri-County Health as it relates to the reopening, and they have been very positive working with us on the City Hall. The council meetings themselves obviously prove to be a challenge for public participation. We have been following what other cities are doing, and as Mr. Tripp identified, Arvada seems to be the only one who is allowing public testimony, and they generally come in, they testify and leave, and there's only a portion of council that's actually in the room from what we understand, and there are portions that are still doing it remotely. Most are still doing their testimony and comments from the public remotely. The changes that we've made, that Michelle has implemented with our public feedback, is actually more opportunities than we've offered before, with the 3 different ways, whether they want to send an email in, whether they want to call and leave a recording, or if they want to participate live. That is more options than we previously had available. With the reopening, what we had originally proposed was coming in for that study session next week, and allowing us a few weeks to have council and staff be in the building and get comfortable with the protocols and making sure that's working properly, and still be able to provide those opportunities to the public, the 3 that I previously noted, during those meetings continuing forward. We originally had anticipated having council meetings with the public attending later down the road. Don mentioned at the time at which we would allow the public into City Hall, for example. That was actually part of our phase 2, when we would be increasing the number of staff potentially in the building up to 50%. That's when we would have the limited capabilities of having the public come in, whether it's preferably by appointment is the primary way that we were identifying that, with the exception obviously being with cashiers for those folks who need to come in and pay bills. We would allow some queuing in without appointment. But those are the primary components. We have identified some substantial challenges. Tonight, there was the emergency ordinance to ratify the emergency declaration made by the city manager as far as the number of people allowed in the lobby and in the council chambers. The good news is that the number for the council chambers actually increased from our original numbers. Our original numbers, we thought we were only going to be able to have about 8 people in the audience. When we met with Tri-County and worked through the room, based on the fact that most people would be stationary and not moving around and mingling around, we can make it up to 16 in that room. The same with the lobby. That does not include the staff members. What our major concern is the flow of the public. So if we have 16 in the council chambers and 16 in the lobby, obviously if there's more than that, if all those people aren't there necessarily to testify, if they just want to listen, we may have a situation where we have to queue people up outside. What do you do with bad weather? How do you make sure that we're making sure that we're fair and equitable for the people who are wanting to listen and participate? And then funneling the people around. And so we've identified a need for probably at least 21 people to help us run those meetings, to actually usher people through, to provide proper security, and to do the screening, just to be able to have them publicly participate in those meetings. We do believe there's other alternatives, and we're still pursuing those. But candidly, as Don said, saying that I'm a little frustrated has been one of the understatements. It's an amazing challenge that every time we think we've got it covered, we turn a corner and there's another twist thrown at us. We met with our security company that helps us with the metal detectors and the security there, who are going to be acting as ambassadors as well. And they came up with their own set of questions and concerns just within the last week. And so we recognize that this is a very complex thing. And our primary goal and priority is obviously city council, the public, and staff's health and safety. And so we've been trying to not be ridiculous in our protocols and overly cautious, but making sure that we are being thoughtful and making sure that we are providing those opportunities for the public to participate. I can ramble on and I'll stop here, I apologize, but that is one of our major concerns, is that we would like to have a little more time with getting council comfortable. If you still would like to come into the building and have the in-person meetings with council and a few staff members, but recommend that we delay with the in-person until we work through some more protocols and see where we are headed with the county. I recognize that may not be the most popular, but I'll provide that feedback. And I'm happy to answer any questions, or Michelle, if I've missed anything. I'm just trying to give high-level summary.
All right, Barbara, before you go off, I have at least 2 more rounds of questions from a couple of people. Mayor Pro Tem Sites and then Councilor Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I really appreciate this presentation, because I was somewhat confused by Councilor Seymour's comment that this resolution, or that we were going to, or emergency ordinance rather, that we were going to pass tonight, emergency resolution, didn't include public comment, because it does. It contemplates 16 people within our council chambers and 16 people in the waiting area. So to me, that's my concern. I am more than happy to meet if it is just us members of council. But until we really have this protocol understood, I actually think it could impact in a negative ways people's efficacy in communicating with council. Most of the members of council here have said they prefer having that face-to-face contact, because they do think it's better communication. And I'm nervous if we can't really accommodate the full amount of public that might want to come in. I don't want people to feel disenfranchised or unheard because they're frustrated with that. I would be fine doing that. And I really want to put a challenge to our staff to possibly investigate a way that we could have video of residents, so they could submit their own video. Could we have something where they could do a link where they could come in and record a Zoom video? Obviously, if they have a sign or if they have anything that breaches our protocol, we're able to vet it and we wouldn't have to play it. But is there something that can still give us that face-to-face contact as we're waiting to see what happens with our spiked numbers before we open up for public feedback and participation in our meetings? Those are my comments and questions. But I was confused, and I apologize if I misunderstood, but it was in our packet today that it was contemplating public participation, not just council, which is why I had my concerns.
Councilor Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Opie, for all this work. And to Mayor Pro Tem Sight's comments, and I'm not in favor of a wholesale opening up the doors. We need, and that's why I was looking at the study session was a great date. That was the date I proposed originally for us to look at that, so it wasn't a full council meeting. I think we have a great opportunity to immensely expand public input. We've already, just like many businesses, we've already seen an expansion with the more ways for people to participate. And I think we should look at that going forward, even a year or two from now, of expanding participation. I'm sure there's people who are doing the voicemails that would be just absolutely mortified to speak in public, but through that, or they're unable to get to council, whatever reason that may be. This has been a great addition to our city's contact with our residents. So I'm not saying let's just open up the doors. I'm saying let's be good examples. Let us practice as a council so that staff can fine tune that. I absolutely think we should keep the video option. We can all bring in our equipment in and set it at the dais or set it in the boardroom and turn on the camera just like we're doing right now. And we don't have to change that part just because we're the same thing. That's what businesses are doing now too. The ones that have fuller capacities, they're not all running into a boardroom to have a meeting. They're in their offices or their cubicles and popping into Zoom, and they can hear each other down the hall. But it brings that cohesiveness and that one thing that this pandemic has hurt as much as anything, and that's the human side of it. So I appreciate us stepping into that and creating to a point to where we can work those bugs out, but we have to lead by being there first. So thank you.
All right, other comments from council? Mr. Demott.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Obie and staff for all your work on this. One quick question I have is, well, first let me say, if you guys need more time to do it right, I am on board with that. Many of us wish we could have been, frankly, we're not in this situation at all. So I don't have a problem with that if that's what you are recommending that we do. One question that I do have, however, because it is a real scenario, especially we've seen as schools go back in and stuff, if one of us ends up being in a situation where we can't attend in person and the rest of the group is there going to be an accommodation so that we still can participate virtually as we have been if the rest of the council is there, and make sure that there's no legal issues? I'm sure logistically it's probably not a big deal, but I want to make sure that's not a legal issue either if the rest of the body's in person.
Well, the legal part I'll let the city attorney speak to, but from what we understand, what we have been setting up and we've been practicing with the room is that we do plan to have, as Councilor Seymour suggested, having your video cameras on you during the meeting. We have installed 2 cameras. We are looking to add other cameras to the room, but at least for the interim, we at least have 2 cameras added. And then we also plan to utilize your video capability like you're doing currently during the meeting, so you'd still be on camera. And then as to the component of having members out of the room, we are anticipating that may happen, that there may be some of you that aren't able to make it, or if you're not feeling well that evening and you want to be out of precaution, don't come. That's part of what we're trying to set it up so that it could work that way. And that's how we're preparing for it. And candidly, even having a substantial number of the staff members still calling in and doing it remotely like we're doing currently. We also are planning for, sorry.
The other thing I was going to ask, besides the legal thing, and I appreciate everything you just said, is that if we do provide more time, my one ask is that we have some sort of target. And if we get to that target date and we say, you know what, we still need another week or whatever, so be it. But I very much want us to get into a habit of saying, here's where our target is that we're going to try to work to. And then we can see where we're at on the ground once we hit that target, would be my preference. And obviously I'm just one vote here, but if we're going to delay, I would strongly ask that we have some sort of target of what that exactly looks like of more time.
I can appreciate that. The one thing I wanted to note before city attorney jumps in, is that our proposal is not to have the council meet in the boardroom any longer. That room is not sufficiently, it can handle 10 people, but not everybody would be able to sit at the table. And so we would move study sessions also into the council chambers as well. And where we previously could fit 14 people at the dais, we now have 7 at the dais with plexiglass between. And then we have the city manager and the city attorney spaced separately behind, and the city clerk actually in the back of the room. Again, trying to space out everyone as best we can. So definitely have some changes in the way the room is set up. Mr. Franco.
Thank you, Ms. Opie. The legality of the hybrid approach, I believe, does fit within our current ordinance addressing remote participation. So I agree with Ms. Opie in that any one of you who felt the need to remotely participate due to your own health, or potentially if you were quarantining after a concern about an exposure, you could absolutely participate remotely. And I believe we would be on the same platform, the GoToWebinar, and you would have the opportunity to participate as you are now. But the remainder of your colleagues who are able would theoretically be in the room, as Ms. Opie has described, with the capacity limitations that are going to be put in place to ensure we can all socially distance and follow public health guidance.
I appreciate.
Before we go to other questions, I want to go back to Councilor Demont's, one of the things he alluded to. Now, we talked about the meeting would be at the dais. Participation in person or remote is fine. But you also had looked at, in the participation of an executive session, you will not stay in the council chambers, but staff will assign you a room somewhere in the building, which means you have to then take your laptop with you to that room and log in just like you do remotely today. So you still have to have a place that's secure. And part of the program they were looking at contained a way to deal with executive sessions, whether you're there or remote, either one.
Two things, and I'll pass it on to that point. One is, not all of us took city laptops. I have my own technology and I prefer it. So I don't know if your plan accommodates that, because I did not take one of the laptops that would have been provided for us. So just to know. And the other thing that I think, and this is more for council, that we understand, if say noon on a Monday, I don't feel good, what's my process to, I'm assuming I probably let the mayor know, but just so that we also have that in our protocols, that if while we're in this situation, that we know here's who we need to notify that, hey, tonight I'm going to actually be at home, so that staff realizes which of us are going to be there and which of us aren't or not. So, but thank you for all your work and answering all my questions.
But Councilor DeMott, are you like me? You're using your own laptop, or you're using a tower?
I use my own laptop.
And so do I, but just like I'm sitting in City Hall tonight, this is my laptop. It's not a city one.
Perfect.
I plan to use it just like I'm using it today. But to your other part, if there's something happens during the day on a Monday when we're scheduled to meet, and you're not going to be able to, I would ask you to notify 3 people: the mayor, the city manager, and the city clerk, so that that's the key people who need to be coordinating your attendance. So if you can at least notify those 3, and we will make note of it before the council meeting starts, just like we would if we had somebody who was out, we were going to do anything to notify people they're not there. You're just going to participate remotely instead of being in person because of an illness or whatever your issue is. Councilor, Mayor Pro Tem, you had another comment? And then we're going to try to wrap this up and move.
Yeah, I have a very quick question. So my concern, as I've stated already, was because the document that was before us talked not about it just starting with council. What we read in our packet said that it was going to include public hearings and public participation. I am happy going forward with it just being council at this point and still having virtual public participation, giving Deputy City Manager Opie more time to kind of work out exactly the logistics of how public participation will work, and also so we can monitor those positives. My question is, and I can just see thumbs up or thumb sides, Councilor DeMont, did you want to hold off entirely for a couple weeks, or would you be comfortable I don't want to push anyone where they're not comfortable, but I wanted to just see, is everyone comfortable with us meeting just us? And we could thumbs up or not. And then if that's the case, would we just have to amend the resolution, or what would we do?
I think the thing that we're at right now is there was no plan to have the public at the next meeting with the council to start with. That was always, but let me finish. That was always going to be the study session with us. I think we're going to have a number of things that are going to drive this. One is the staff being ready, but also we don't know what the final version of the mitigation plan and the directive from CDPHE is going to be and how that will affect us. We probably won't know that before Monday of next week. So anything we do with the emergency ordinance will have to have some consideration that we may be overruled in some aspects of it, depending upon the order coming out of the health department. I recommend you would go ahead and approve the emergency ordinance as it's written, with the understanding that staff still has the ability to say we're not ready. And I think I've heard that pretty well uniformly through the council, that if it's safe for us to come in on Monday, that's one thing. But if they're not prepared to deal with the public coming in, which is not scheduled for Monday anyway, and it may be a couple more weeks. As soon as they have a target, when they think they will be comfortable, tell us what that target is, understanding that the complications of the mitigation plan and the state order may override that. And we'll have to deal with that as things are changing on a daily basis, and we've seen numbers changing during the day to day. Those will affect what's going to happen with us. And we just don't have a way to control that. I can give Councilor DeMott, I want to come in on November 1st. Sorry, November 2nd. But if we don't get the numbers down by the end of the month, that's likely not going to happen. But it's a target.
Yeah, I think maybe I'm not being clear with my question. My question is, if we approve this tonight, the next city council meeting would be November 2nd, or no, sorry. At the next city council meeting, wouldn't, and maybe I'm misreading this, wouldn't we, not the study session, but at the next city council meeting, wouldn't we, the way it's stated now, be open for resident participation?
Can I have Frankel join us, please? I think he can answer that best.
Maybe I'm misunderstanding it, but that's where my heartburn is coming from.
Thank you, Ms. Opie. And Mayor Pro Tem, to your question, the order as it's drafted, first, some background on the order. We were working to put into place a framework that would allow for city council meetings to be held in person in a sort of hybrid approach where council members could be either in person or remote, and with limited numbers of public in attendance to ensure social distancing and safety for all involved. So the order that's before you right now, if the plan is to potentially put off for 2 weeks the initiation of in-person meetings with public attendees, my recommendation would honestly be to continue this for 2 weeks, and we can look at the mitigation plan, and we can have the underlying emergency order withdrawn and rewritten in a manner so that it's consistent with the mitigation plan. We did the best we could to put something in front of you tonight so that we would have something in place by the 26th. Honestly, the 19th and the 26th are both on staff's minds. But if we are going to delay for 2 weeks the initiation of public attendees, I think having those extra 2 weeks to craft an emergency order for your consideration that's in line with the mitigation plan makes the most sense to me.
And Councilor Bowles, I think that was part of what the question you were raising, is waiting on taking action on item 10A until we had this discussion.
That's right. Yeah, I agree. I thought this discussion was important and we needed to talk about this before we voted on the emergency order. Exactly. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Frankel, understanding where we are, that we have a emergency ordinance before us that probably needs to be revised. my recommendation to you as the city attorney is that we just requested a motion to table item 10A to a date uncertain, because we need to figure out, first of all, we need to get the order back, which that could be probably 2 weeks. If I'm reading what the folks in the county are saying, because they're only going to submit it this week. That's not likely they're going to get it back before the end of next week. So that's almost 2 weeks. And once we get that back, then the staff can bring forward a revision to that order and represent it. And it may be as early as the 26th, but it may not be.
So I think tabling it would have the same effect, and it would give an opportunity to refine the current order that's proposed for your consideration. And I would recommend that we have a chance to refine it further if we're going to have another 2 weeks or however long it will be before you wish to consider it.
All right. Ms. Opie, in light of that, would you still be recommending or comfortable with the council coming back for the study session next Monday without the public?
We can certainly make that happen.
Okay. Mr. Bowles, since you asked for the delay, would you mind considering a motion to table item 10A? And then we'll bring it back as soon as we have staff able to revise the plan and represent it.
Do I include that in the motion, or did I just say to a date uncertain?
To a date uncertain, because we don't know what we're going to see yet.
Mr. Mayor, I would like
Mr. Mayor.
Sorry.
Hang on just a second. Go ahead, Ms. Opie.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Dave's probably giving you legal advice. I just want a clarification, so I'll let him do the legal part first.
Okay.
Okay, my question was a procedural one, and I first wanted to confirm that you're finished with this agenda item for the COVID update before you called the earlier item that was reorganized in the agenda.
I think that we're there.
I just had the one clarification if I could.
Sure.
I just want to confirm that all of council is comfortable with coming back in next week. That if you would like to come in, that we can make that happen. If you would like to delay and have the first meeting be October 26th as your first in person, we're happy to do that. We just want to make sure we're meeting your needs in that regard. Again, without the public, that is a huge focus for us, is that capability. But we obviously will need to set up some time with you prior to that meeting, either one, to walk through protocols and make sure everyone is comfortable with the room setup and how that'll flow.
All right, so it's either the 19th or the 26th, correct?
Yes, sir, whatever is your pleasure.
All right, so let me poll the council. We'll see what the majority wants. So Councilor Bowles, 19th or the 26th?
I can be in the 19th. I would be fine with that. And that, again, let me confirm, that means the public aren't, that's council members and whatever staff agree to it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Council members and very limited staff members, very limited staff members.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Opie. I'd be glad to be here.
All right, Councilor Demott, 19th or the 26th?
I'm comfortable with the 19th.
All right, Councilor Smith, the same question.
I'm comfortable with the 19th.
Councilor Seymour.
Comfortable with the 19th.
Councilor Scully.
19th.
Mayor Pro Tem Sites.
I'm comfortable with the 19th.
All right, Ms. Opie, we're going to target the 19th as a council and staff only. No public.
Thank you for the clarification. Appreciate council's flexibility and willingness to let us work this through.
All right, Mr. Volz, would you then try to do a motion for the tabling of item 10A?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that we table Councilor's Bill number 31 to a date uncertain.
Can I get a second on the motion, please? Ms. Sites? Sorry, hang on a second.
Second.
Or Mr. Demott, either one of the two. All those in favor, please signify by aye.
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 Is any opposed? All right, the motion is tabled until a date uncertain, and we'll be getting a report back. I know we have not gotten anywhere near through our agenda, but I also know that you've been sitting since a little after 6 and it's 9 o'clock now. I'm going to give you about a 5-minute break. Try to be back no later than 9:05, and then we will reconvene and try to get through a very lengthy agenda for tonight. So we are in recess until 9:05.
You what? 16 days of the what? Oh, that's really good. Turn it up. Where's James? She's not here. Sometimes. She's sometimes.
Ms. Parker, are you back?
Yes, in case you didn't hear me singing to my cat with my mic open, I am in fact back.
I wasn't going to bring that up, but since you brought it up, it was a very nice
Oh,
song.
well, Joe, I
Yeah.
got about 30 texts. Thanks.
Hey, believe me, I've had it happen, so I know what you're going through. We're going to do GIDs next, correct? Michelle?
Sorry, now I'm muted when I'm trying to speak. Yes, we are moving into our GID consolidated meeting, then will be followed by our WIDA meeting, and then into our post meeting, followed by 2 executive sessions.
All right, I'm trying to get papers where they belong. All right, Ms. Parker, just for the sake of the conversation, let's go ahead and do a short recall or a roll call.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, or I'm sorry, Chairman, Chairman Atchison,
Okay, I'm here.
Board Member Demott,
Here.
Vice Chair Seitz.
Here.
Board Member Seymour.
Here.
Board Member Scully.
Here.
Board Member Smith.
Present.
And Board Member Bowles.
Here.
By my clock, the time is now 9:06. We are convened as the Board of Directors for the General Improvement Districts. Mr. Frankel, before I go in and have someone do all of this, I believe we have the ability to accept the meeting minutes only as a single motion, or do I have to do one for each of the 9?
Mr. Chair, I believe you may do them together.
For the voice on the minutes only, though.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. All right, if we have a member of the board of directors who would like to. Hang on a second, our chat thing just went berserk. All right. Board member Demott, would you care to try to clean up the minutes?
Sure. Just trying to think how you read this.
Very carefully. If you could just say you want to do one motion for each of this items 2A through 2H. For the meeting minutes, those dates, because they're all the same day, so that would be okay.
Gotcha. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that the board approves the minutes of the October 14th, 2019 meeting for items A through H.
And Mr. Voles.
I second the motion.
I have a motion and a second for the board to consider the approval of the minutes of the preceding meetings on items 2A through 2H of October the 14th. All those in favor, please signify by aye.
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 All opposed? Hearing none? I thank you. We're approved. Going on to the next item. At this point, we are on scheduled to hold a public hearing on the 2021 budgets for the following City of Westminster General Improvement Districts: 136th Avenue, 144th Avenue, Amherst, Mandalay Town Center, Orchard Park Place North, Park 1200, Sheridan Crossing, and Westminster Station. At this time, I will see if any member of the board has any comments that they'd like to make in regards to the 2021 budget proposals from staff. Seeing no comments from the board, I will now open this up to the public. If there is anyone in attendance in the public virtually that would like to make comments to any one of the budgets, I will accept that through the city clerk's office at this time. Ms. Parker, do we have anyone?
Mr. Chair, we did not receive any requests to testify live during this virtual public hearing, nor did we receive any written public comments or voicemails regarding any of these public hearings before you for the General Improvement District Consolidated meeting.
All right. Moving to the next comments.
Mr. Chair.
Just a second.
Okay.
I got you.
Well,
Moving to see if there's any other comments now on the public comment side from the board or member sites.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a general question about all of these. Within each budget, there's an area where it says in a given year when revenues exceed expenditures, the fund balance for the district will increase. Those funds will be available for future appropriations when needed by the district. Conversely, when expenditures exceed revenues in any given year, prior year unspent revenues or fund balance is used to meet the district's current year obligation. Use of prior year unspent revenues for the district in a given year would be identified in the revenue section below. Now, most of these don't have a large balance, but some like Amherst have accrued a pretty large balance. And I'm wondering at what point, when would those ever be used? Because their expenditures are pretty low. And are there uses that would benefit that neighborhood? That one particularly caught my eye because there's been some issues there. And I was wondering, and I recognize maybe it's not an appropriate use, but I was wondering if there was any ways we could help utilize those dollars to assist with some of the concerns residents in that neighborhood have had.
Mr. Tripp.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, for the question. Deputy Dorr or our Finance Director, Tammy Hitchens, why don't you step in on this?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tripp. I'll go ahead and jump in here on this. So the GIDs that are actually generating some fund balances, basically what that is for the capital projects that we end up doing it. And in Amherst case in particular, the primary thing that we have to replace is the fence. And we've done that like in the past, and we'll obviously have to do that in the future, but that is the primary purpose for Amherst. And of course, to be able to do that, we have to save up the money to be able to do it at the time that it's needed. So it's generally pretty well. So it does look like we don't spend very much money year after year, but what we're doing is we're saving for that big fence replacement.
Ms. Seitz, go ahead.
One thing that being on this job, even almost 7 years, that consistently amazes me is how expensive everything is. But the fund balance, if I'm reading this correctly, was, $750,000. Is a fence replacement that expensive? And I see some head shaking yes. So obviously I'm not good at maintenance cost appraisals. Is that within line? Like that seems inappropriate.
Depends on how big the fence is.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Any other questions from any member of the board? If there are no other questions from the board and we have none from the public, then I will declare the public hearing closed and we will open it up to item 3B, resolution number 25. Ms. Scully?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to adopt resolution number 25. It sets the mill levy for the tax year 2020 for collection in 2021 at 16 mills for the city of Westminster, 136th Avenue General Improvement District, formally adopts the 2021 budget for the district as presented and appropriates the funds as budgeted.
Mr. Bowles?
I second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any other questions from any member of the board? Seeing none, Ms. Parker, this is a roll call vote.
Chairperson Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. Board Member Demott.
Yes.
Demott votes yes. Vice Chair Seitz.
Yes.
Seitz votes yes. Board Member Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. Board Member Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Board Member Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes. And Board Member Bowles.
Yes.
Bowles votes yes.
All right, thank you, board. You have done one of all of them. Ms. Scully, since you and Mr. Bowles have volunteered, you're on again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to adopt resolution number 19 that sets the mill levy for the tax year 2020 for collection in 2021 at 20 mills for the city of Westminster, 144th Avenue General Improvement District, formally adopts the 2021 budget for the district and appropriates the funds as budgeted.
Mr. Bowles?
I second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. Are there any questions from any member of the board in regards to item 3C, I'm sorry. Seeing none. Ms. Parker?
Thank you. Board Member Demott.
Yes.
Demott votes yes. Vice Chair Seitz.
Yes.
Seitz votes yes. Board Member Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. Board Member Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Board Member Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes. Board Member Bowles.
Yes.
Bowles votes yes. And Chairperson Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes.
All right, board, you have passed item 10C. Continuing with the same item D under that one, Ms. Scully?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to adopt resolution number 40 that sets the mill levy for the tax year 2020 for collection in 2021 at 5 mills for the city of Westminster Amherst General Improvement District, formally adopts the 2021 budget for the district as presented and appropriates the funds as budgeted.
Mr. Bowles?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Is there any questions or comments from the board? Seeing no comments or questions, Ms. Parker, the roll call vote for item 10D.
Vice Chair Sights.
Yes.
Sights votes yes. Board Member Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. Board Member Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Board Member Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes. Board Member Bowles.
Yes.
Bowles votes yes. Chairperson Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. Board Member Demott.
Yes.
And Demott votes yes.
And my apology, that was not 10D, it was 3D. Moving on to 3E. Ms. Scully, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to adopt resolution number 24 that sets the mill levy for the tax year 2020 for collection in 2021 at 35 mills for the City of Westminster Mandalay Town Center General Improvement District, formally adopts the 2021 budget for the district as presented and appropriates the funds as budgeted.
Mr. Vols.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any comments or questions from the member of the authority for item 3E? Seeing none, Ms. Parker, roll call, please.
Board Member Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. Board Member Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Board Member Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes. Board Member Bowles.
Yes.
Bowles votes yes. Chairperson Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. Board Member Demott.
Yes.
Demott votes yes. And Vice Chair Sights.
Yes.
Sights votes yes.
All right, board, moving on to the next item, 3F. Ms. Scully again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to adopt resolution number 13 that sets the mill levy for the tax year 2020 for collection in 2021 at 13 mills for the Westminster Orchard Park Place North General Improvement District, formally adopts the 2021 budget for the district as presented and appropriates the funds as budgeted.
Mr. Vols.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Are there comments from the board on item 3F, resolution 13? Seeing none, Ms. Parker, roll call, please.
Board Member Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Board Member Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes. Board Member Bowles.
Yes.
Bowles votes yes. Chairperson Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. Board Member Demott.
Yes.
Demott votes yes. Vice Chair Sights.
Yes.
Sights votes yes. And Board Member Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes.
Moving on to the item 3G. Ms. Scully.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to adopt resolution number 7 that sets the mill levy for the tax year 2020 for collection in 2021 at 10 mills for the City of Westminster Park 1200 General Improvement District, formally adopts the 2021 budget for the district as presented and appropriates the funds as budgeted.
Mr. Vols.
Second.
I have a motion and a second on item 3G, resolution number 7. Any comments from the council? I'm sorry, from the board? Seeing none, Ms. Parker, roll call for resolution 7. Ms. Parker, did we lose you?
Apologies, I'm speaking into the muted microphone. Board Member Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes. Board Member Bowles.
Yes.
Bowles votes yes. Chairperson Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. Board Member Demott.
Yes.
Demott votes yes. Vice Chair Sights.
Yes.
Sights votes yes. Board Member Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. And Board Member Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes.
Thank you, board. Moving on to the next item, 3H. Ms. Scully.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to adopt resolution number 36 that sets the mill levy for the tax year 2020 for collection in 2021 at 12 mills for the City of Westminster Sheridan Crossing General Improvement District, formally adopts the 2021 budget for the district as presented and appropriates the funds as budgeted.
Ms. Scully, would you reread the resolution number?
Number 37. Do you want me to read the whole thing, sir?
No, just 30. I thought you said 36 in the beginning.
I'm sorry, I might have. I stand corrected. It is number 37.
Okay, Mr. Vols,
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions from the board in regards to resolution number 37? So seeing none, Ms. Parker, if you would, resolution 37, please.
Board Member Bowles.
Yes.
Bowles votes yes. Chairperson Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. Board Member Demott.
Yes.
Demott votes yes. Vice Chair Seitz.
Yes.
Seitz votes yes. Board Member Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. Board Member Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. And Board Member Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes.
All right, board, we have one more. Ms. Scully, would you take the last one, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to adopt resolution number 3 that sets the mill levy for the tax year 2020 for collection in 2021 at 35 mills for the City of Westminster, Westminster Station General Improvement District, formally adopts the 2021 budget for the district as presented and appropriates the funds as budgeted.
Mr. Vols,
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any comments or questions from any member of the authority? Seeing none, Ms. Parker, 3I, please.
Chairperson Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. Board Member Demott.
Yes.
Demott votes yes. Vice Chair Seitz.
Yes.
Seitz votes yes. Board Member Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. Board Member Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Board Member Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes. And Board Member Bowles.
Yes.
Bowles votes yes.
Thank you, members of the authority. Ms. Parker, I believe that concludes all business for the general improvement districts for tonight.
That is correct. We still have an agenda for the Westminster Economic Development Authority, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I'm just worried
Mr.
about
Chair.
right now. That takes care of all the GID stuff, correct?
You are correct.
All right. So at this time, we will adjourn the General Improvement District Board of Directors. It is 9:24. We will reconvene now as the Westminster Economic Development Authority. The roll call for the past two meetings, the City Council and the GID District Board, will stand for the roll call. Moving on to item 2, the minutes of the Westminster Economic Development Authority. Mr. Demott, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the Westminster Economic Development Authority approve the minutes of July 27, 2020 meeting as presented.
And Board Member Smith,
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving of the minutes of the July 27th meeting, please signify by aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are carried. Moving to the first item on the meeting for the WEDA Association is the holding a public hearing of the Westminster Economic Development Authority 2021-2022 proposed budget. Mr. Tripp or anyone from the staff, you have any comments or questions you'd like to provide before we open this up for public comment?
No, Mr. Mayor, we don't. You've got a staff report from Tammy Hitchens and Karen Krager, and they're available to answer your questions. Thank you.
Okay. Opening it up to the board. Is there any comments or questions in regards to the report provided by staff? Board Member Seitz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a question. I know this year we were able to utilize funds from the North Huron URA to invest in our interceptor. And I believe that was a significant investment. If I'm correct, it was around 15 or $16 million. And so that is money that follows doesn't impact our Tabor guidance as far as our enterprise fund goes. And it's money that our ratepayers don't have to pay for our system. I was wondering, is there any future opportunities for some level of investment in our utility enterprise, our utility CIP with this sort of utilizing these URA dollars? Is there any capacity for that, or is there any areas that it would be appropriate? I just really think that was very innovative and very helpful, and want to see if it can be replicated in any other parts of our community.
Mr. Tripp, would you like to refer that to someone?
Well, I think that the short answer to that is that the ability to use these funds, Vice Chairman cites, is exactly what, as you've outlined, it's a creative way to get work done without needing to charge it to the utility customers. And what that allows us to do in moving forward is to pay for other expenses that are necessary within the utility from the funds that would have otherwise been spent here. And as you're contemplating through your processes of deciding, the future funding of capital projects over the next 5 to 10 years, that gives you a little bandwidth to work with as you look at setting rates. So it will have an indirect impact on an ability to keep rates down ultimately. And if I have anybody from the capital group in Public Works that wants to weigh in on this, or Tam, if you have any comment, feel free to jump in.
So I'll jump in. This is Tammy Hitchens, Finance Director. With respect to those funds that are in the URA, they can actually be utilized for several purposes. One, what the city has typically done, or what WEDA has typically done, is to do infrastructure and public improvements with the URA funds. Other types of funds, types of things that these funds can be used for is if there's assistance with development that needs to be done up there. If there's the idea is to eliminate blight in the area, and so it can be utilized for all kinds of things like that. The question is there other public works and utilities projects that could be done up there? If you recall, some of you may recall, a few years we built Orchard Parkway with some of this money. And so it can be utilized for those types of projects. And so really it's just a matter of prioritizing what projects we need to do up there. And so it could be utilized for either utility fund or type projects, or it could be utilized for roads and other types of infrastructure as well as actually towards development activity.
Ms. Hitchens, just a clarification, the money that's earmarked within a URA must be spent within that URA, not transferred to others. Is that correct?
It's pretty correct. It has to be in that general area. The improvement has to be beneficial to the URA area, even though it might be slightly outside the area.
Well, I think my point is we can't take it from the orchard and move it to the other end of town.
That is correct.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, if I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
To just expand slightly on Ms. Hitchens' comments, with which I agree, the North Huron urban renewal area, it features an urban renewal plan that council adopted at the start of the area being designated. And as Ms. Hitchens points out, that urban renewal plan is designed to alleviate blight within the district. And that plan clearly identifies infrastructure as having been lacking when the district was created. So it was clearly an allowable use of the urban renewal funds to address infrastructure needs within the district. And to Ms. Hitchens' comment, if stormwater is about to flow into your district, I think it is a fair expenditure to address that stormwater. And I think that may be the example that comes to mind with the North Huron area, because I believe some of those funds in the past were used to address stormwater concerns, which drained into that district from just outside of it. So I believe it was an allowable use for the urban renewal funds at the time. But generally correct not to use funds from one urban renewal area out to projects that are not touching or related to that urban renewal area. So we are, I believe, somewhat constrained as to how those funds are spent. They need to be pursuing the goals of the urban renewal plan.
Thank you, and I apologize for being so unclear in my question. I was definitely not ever contemplating using money from one urban renewal area in another area of the city, but simply wondering if there were other urban renewal areas similar to the North Huron one that had contemplated infrastructure as one of the allowable uses and that we had a capacity. So was there any area, we have multiple URAs, that this might be an appropriate tool? And so that was really my question. And I apologize for how clumsy I asked it.
Other questions or comments from a member of the board?
We can certainly follow up on that question and get you a response. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Ms. Parker, this is a public meeting. Do we have anyone who had signed up to testify or offer testimony on this hearing?
Mr. Chairperson, we did not receive any requests to testify live during this meeting, nor did we receive any voicemail or written public comments for this specific public hearing this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. With that being said, I will call the public hearing as a close, and we'll open it up for the adoption of Resolution 211. Mr. Voles, you had asked to make the motion.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to adopt Resolution 211, adopting the 2021-2022 proposed budget for Westminster Economic Development Authority as presented, including the appropriation of funds as set forth.
Board Member Scully?
I second.
I have a motion and a second for the adoption of resolution number 211. Are there any comments or questions from the members of the authority? Seeing none, Ms. Parker, this is a roll call vote for item 3A2.
Chairperson Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. Board Member Demott.
Yes.
Demott votes yes. Vice Chair Seitz.
Yes.
Seitz votes yes. Board Member Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. Board Member Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Board Member Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes. And Board Member Bowles.
Yes.
Bowles votes yes.
All right, thank you, members of the authority. That concludes the business of the Westminster Economic Development Authority, with the exception that we do have an executive session scheduled later tonight. We have, at this time, we'll close that portion of the meeting. It is at 9:35, and we'll move to the City Council post-meeting briefing. We have two briefings scheduled for tonight. There's no action to be taken, but these are for briefings. Moving on to item 2. This has to do with the 2020 state and local ballot measures. Mr. Tripp, who do you have for this one?
Chris Lindsay, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr. Tripp and Mr. Mayor, but I'm going to turn it right over to Ms. Teresa Bocco, one of our policy and budget analysts, who is prepared to give you a brief presentation this evening.
Okay, Ms. Bocco, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Chris. I just, as you received in your packet, we are presenting the 2020 ballot measures for you this evening and have identified some issues for you to consider and some staff recommendations. So Mr. Lindsay and I are here this evening to discuss those recommendations and receive your feedback on them. Subsequent to this discussion, we will bring back a resolution on October 26th for items on which council has consensus. As stated in the staff report, staff recommendations are based on the principles articulated in the 2020 legislative policy statement. And the staff report provided detail on the analysis and basis for the recommendations. So if it pleases council, we'll walk through each item and take your feedback on the recommended position. And we do appreciate your time tonight to discuss these items. So we'll go ahead and start with Amendment B, which is a repeal of the Gallagher Amendment. I won't go through the ballot language, but the staff recommendation on this is to recommend a support position. Again, using the principles in the 2020 legislative policy statement. As stated in the Blue Book excerpt, Amendment B prevents further decreases in the residential rate, thus preventing declines in local government property tax revenue used to provide local services. This supports the city's general finance principle that supports the continuation of existing local government financing methods and the addition of new methods for local governments to support the provision of municipal services to citizens. Also, as stated in the ballot language, Amendment B will help preserve funding for local districts that provide fire protection, police, ambulance, and hospital. Staff has identified the public safety principle in the legislative statement that the City of Westminster works diligently toward keeping citizens safe anywhere in the city. The City of Westminster recognizes the critical importance of maintaining public order, providing a safe environment, and protecting the lives and property of citizens of Westminster. And finally, as stated in the ballot language, Amendment B will help preserve funding for local districts that provide kindergarten through 12th grade education. And as stated in the Blue Book excerpt, Amendment B increases local property tax collections for school districts, which staff sees that this supports the public education principle of supporting legislation that provides adequate funding to all school districts. So based on that reasoning, using the filter of the legislative statement, we are recommending a support position, and if it pleases the council, we'll just take them one at a time and indicate if there's any questions.
All right. Council, does anyone have any questions on the recommendation that staff has? Mr. Demott?
My only question is, once you finish questions, are you going to get our position one by one on these? Or are we going to get through all of them and then get positions at the end?
I think the proposal was just deal with one ballot issue at a time. Is that correct, Mr. Belko?
If that pleases council, we can do that and gain clarity as we go through them.
Okay. So did you have a comment or question, Councilor Demott?
Since I have the floor, I guess I'll just give my position. I'm not in favor of supporting it, so I'll leave it to my colleagues.
Okay. Any other comments from any member of the council? The one that I dealt with this recent, this was almost 2 years ago now, was with the urban drainage. We did both a deep roosting and a de-Gallagher in order to get money for the district, which right now benefits Westminster as well, because that adds additional funding that we get on flood control measures. Between the two of them, we more than doubled the available budget coming back to communities. In fact, by the third year, we will almost quadruple the money that's coming back to us through the communities in both counties and cities within the 8-county metro area. So it has turned out to be very beneficial for both of those. However, we will go with a majority of the council. Mayor Pro Tem Sites, you got a comment?
No, I just thought we were going to poll. Sorry.
Yep, I will as soon as make sure everyone's had a chance to comment. Any other comments? Staff is asking for a position. I will ask each of the state position, either you support the staff recommendation or you don't, and then we'll see where the majority lines up. Councilor Scully?
I support.
Mayor Pro Tem Sites?
I support.
Councilor Seymour?
Support.
Councilor Voles?
I support the staff recommendation.
Councilor Demott?
No, I don't support it.
All right, Counselor Smith
I don't support it.
and the mayor supports. We have a majority 5-2 to support the position of staff on this particular item. Ms. Boco, the next one, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The next is Proposition EE, entitled Taxes on Nicotine Products. This is a question to approve new taxes. This is a lengthy ballot measure, so again, I will not read it verbatim. That is in your staff report, but our recommendation is a support position for this as well. And our basis for this recommendation is alignment with the following principles in the 2020 statement. As stated in the Blue Book excerpt, the measure will provide funding for the following programs: preschool programs, rural schools, and K-12 education. This supports the city's public education principle of supporting legislation that provides adequate funding to all school districts, and supports legislation that provides state and local resources for the expansion of quality early childhood education opportunities. Secondly, as stated in the Blue Book excerpt, the measure will provide funding for the following programs: housing development and eviction legal assistance. This supports the city's economic development principle in the legislative statement of furthering affordable and workforce housing opportunities, as well as supporting legislation that provides the protection of renters' rights through fair and transparent and equitable leasing practices. For those reasons, we are recommending a support position. And also would just like to mention that as discussed in the proposed budget on September 19th and October 5th, staff is proposing to remove the city's sales tax exemption on the purchase of cigarettes. Chris and Larry are available to provide more information on this if needed.
All right. Let me start with Counselor Seymour has a question.
I'm sorry, I don't have my blue book with me tonight, but my understanding on revenues for most taxation like this from the state budget, while it can be said that it's going to apply to program A, B, or C, all dollars flow into the general fund and then must be appropriated each year. Is that correct?
Correct. And I would also, Counselor Seymour, yes, I'll just leave it at that. I was going to point you to Figure 1, which does in the Blue Book provide information on how this is distributed and across multiple years.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there other comments or questions from any member of the council? Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, so I am going to be supporting this tonight, but I do want to recognize that it was actually maybe a harder choice than people may realize. I do abhor smoking. I think it's awful for public health, but I also recognize it's an addiction, and oftentimes these types of measures really disproportionately hit low-income folks who are addicted to a product, and so I struggled with it. But I do understand that especially teenagers are very price sensitive to the cost of a pack of cigarettes. I do think this goes towards helping, potentially, hopefully, not having so many people adopt the habit of smoking, and then it does go to fund some really important programs. So I just wanted to acknowledge the struggle I had with this one.
Councilor Demott?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm kind of on the opposite side of the same things as what Mayor Pro Tem Seitz just said. For one, by principle, I don't agree with sin taxes is what I would consider this. And I think that the demographic that this is going to hit, or, it's going to definitely be unfairly slighted towards a certain demographic of folks. So I'm not in support of it. I also don't like where we're funding in programs that we do absolutely need to fund off of somebody's addiction. So I will not be supporting it.
Other comments from council? My own concern with this reminds me of the marijuana tax, where we got the promise of all the funds that were going to come in for our schools. And if you look at where the money from that goes, it goes to the BEST fund. And that BEST fund has not been able to help any of the metro districts. And it's very hard even for the rural districts. But the other part of this one is that there's no amount of money set aside. There's no information into when they will have the revenues for this. or how you're going to get it out for any of the programs. And to me, that's just another ploy of what's been done before, because most of the people putting this on are the same people who put on the marijuana tax bill. So there are too many loopholes in this thing that doesn't provide me a level of comfort that we're going to actually get any money out of it for our schools or the programs. And therefore, I'll be voting no on it. Any other comments from council? If not, we'll poll the council. Ms. Scully, yes or no?
I support.
Mayor Pro Tem,
I support.
Councilor Seymour,
I do not support.
Councilor Bowles.
I support.
I'm sorry, say again.
I support.
Okay. Councilor Demott,
I do not support.
Councilor Smith,
I do not support.
and the mayor does not. So we have a 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4-3. Am I correct? Councilor Seymour,
sir.
you were for it, right? Okay. Staff, that one passes 4-3.
Mayor and Council, if I may, this is Larry Dorr speaking, Deputy City Manager and Chief Financial Officer. Ms. Boko mentioned at the top of her comments regarding Proposition EE that the City Manager's proposed 2021 budget recommended a repeal of the city's exemption for city sales tax on cigarettes sold within the city of Westminster, and forecasted a net revenue increase and administrative convenience related thereto. At your last study session and one or two prior, we've had a discussion about what that exemption means and how that operates and so forth. And it was the council's pleasure at that time to understand the holistic approach to the city's sales tax exemption, Proposition EE, and an opportunity for feedback and information from the staff from Policy and Budget Department. We've done that now and want to understand your direction going forward related to what's proposed in the city's budget and the city's exemption of sales tax. And of course, our city attorney has provided some information to the council along the way, and we're both available to take your feedback, comments, and direction on the next steps related to that, as it would involve, for the benefit of retailers and so forth, similar to Proposition EE, a reasonable amount of time to implement that administrative change for businesses within the city. Mayor and Council?
All right, let me start with Councilor Demott.
I actually just want to go back. Did I hear you say that it passed? Because I thought we had 4 against that and 3 for.
Or it was Councilor Scully, Mayor Pro Tem Sites, Councilor Seymour, and Councilor Bowles.
No, Councilor Seymour was against.
Were opposed. I'm sorry?
Councilor Seymour was opposed, right?
Yeah, I was opposed. So when you asked, I shook my head at the wrong time. So my apologies.
I was watching the head go up and down.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, the last one that was on the cigarette tax does fail on a 4-3 vote. I had it backwards. Thank you for the clarification.
Yep, that was the only thing I had. I don't have a question about the item that city manager or deputy city manager Dorr brought up.
All right, but we're about to give you that question. So we had asked to wait till we had seen what the cigarette tax was going to look like and how this may or may not affect us. But since it doesn't, in this particular issue, staff still needs direction from council so that there is a decision to eliminate that tax exemption. Then they would need time to start the public education with the retailers. So the recommendation from staff was to eliminate that exemption. This will be the same kind of a poll of the council if you are supportive of staff recommendation or not. Councilor Scully.
Yes, I'm in support of the staff recommendation.
All right, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Sites,
I'm also supportive.
Councilor Seymour.
I apologize for the extra comment on here, but since this is local issue and it affects us, I see this differently from going to a state budget without line item certainty. So I'll support it from a city standpoint.
Okay. Counselor Bowles,
Yeah, I support the staff recommendation.
Counselor Demott,
No, I don't.
all right, Counselor Smith,
Much like Councillor Seymour, I support this at a city level, as we would have more say as far as the line item budgets.
all right. And then the mayor is also a yes vote. So Mr. Dorr, your recommendation to move forward with the removal of the exemption is approved on a 6-1 vote.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We will prepare an appropriate ordinance for your final approval and adoption at your upcoming meetings. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Boko, move to the next one, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moving on to Adams County Issue 1A, staff has identified this as for your attention. Again, I won't read the lengthy ballot language. Staff is recommending support of Adams County would like the existing open space sales tax of 1/4 of 1% to be permanently extended. Excuse me. The alignment with the following principles in the legislative statement is with the general finance principle, which supports continuation of existing local government financing methods and addition of new methods for local governments to support provision of municipal services. Also, under the finance principle, it states supports equitable sharing with municipalities of existing and future state revenues derived from traditional state collected and locally shared revenues. In addition, this supports the city's parks and open space principle that Westminster works to maintain and develop beautiful, desirable, safe, and environmentally responsible city. Increasing and preserving open space is a high priority in the city of Westminster. So with that, staff is recommending a support position for Adams County 1A, Issue 1A, excuse me.
Issue 1A, okay, thank you. Council, any comments on this request? All right, seeing no comments, I will again poll the council. This is a recommendation from the staff for support of Adams County item 1A, which is open space tax, which we do benefit quite a bit from. So Councilor Scully,
I support.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Strong support.
Councilor Seymour,
Support.
Councilor Bowles,
I support.
Councilor Demott,
I support.
Councilor Smith,
I support.
and Mayor, we are on 7-0 on support of item 1A. Ms. Boko, you have one other one?
Yes, we have one final issue. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's Adams County Issue 1B. I'll just quickly summarize that this is Adams County with no increase to the county tax rate shall Adams County existing 1/2 of 1%. Sales tax be permanently extended for continued purpose of improvements to or the building of road and bridge projects. The ballot measure does include that these revenues from such tax continue to be shared among the county and incorporated cities and towns in the county for improvements to or the building of road and bridge projects. Again, this supports the city's general finance principle of a continuing existing local government finance methods. And I'm summarizing at this point since we've went over them multiple times, and then supports equitable sharing with municipalities of existing and future state revenues derived from traditional state collected and locally shared revenues. In addition, this supports the city's transportation and mobility principles of revenue streams for state and regional multimodal transportation needs and funding to support operations and maintenance. So we would, based on that review of the statement, recommend a support position for Adams County Issue 1B.
All right, let me make sure I've got the order. Mr. Demott, I think I got your piece already. Did you have one on this one? Or is that the last one?
That was the last one.
All right, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Excuse me?
Go ahead.
I'm going to strongly support this one as well. I'll just remind everybody that within our citizen survey and other community outreach, we've consistently seen mobility road maintenance, multimodal access, all of the things, transportation, to be very important to our residents. And this is an important way to fund that.
Other comments from council? All right, the question to council is they support our non-support of the staff recommendation to support Adams County item 1B. Councilor Scully,
I support.
Mayor Pro Tem Sites,
Support.
Councilor Seymour,
Support.
Councilor Bowles,
Support.
Councilor Demott,
I support.
Councilor Smith,
I support.
and the mayor support. So that gives us 7-0 on that one. Ms. Poco, do you have any others?
No, there are no others. Mr. Mayor, I would just like to confirm that we will be bringing back a resolution to indicate the council has taken support positions for Amendment B and Adams County issues 1A and 1B. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other comments or questions on these? The next one up, I believe, Mr. Frankel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The next item on the agenda this evening are some follow-up edits that we have made to the City Council rules and regulations and the Council Code of Conduct. Following the council retreats in August and July, we had feedback from the council as to edits that were desired in these documents. And as you can see, the proposed edits are before you tonight for consideration. Apologies, they are kind of voluminous, particularly at this late hour. So I have a general question, which would be, would it be council's pleasure to consider these proposed edits and provide staff some feedback, not necessarily this evening, but in advance of a future meeting where we could then either bring forward formal action on the rules and or a study session item on the code of conduct for your consideration.
All right. Councilor Demott, do you have a question or comment?
I was just trying to find in the adjustments if we remove the 10-minute limit for council comment, because I thought that we had a general consensus on that and I wasn't seeing a change there. Maybe I missed it. I was trying to find it.
So I don't believe that we had made that edit because I don't believe there was consensus based on the notes that our facilitators were keeping from that night. But if there is consensus, obviously we can make that edit and change the rule with regard to the 10-minute clock. So we're all on the same page. Let me go to that section and be sure.
I think something that, and I want to say it was Mayor Pro Tem Sites, and I apologize if it wasn't, but with these virtual meetings, there's been a lot of times where we're using that council comment time to get through a lot of our stuff. So I thought that we had that discussion, but if not, that's fine. That would still be my preference if I had 3 supporters. Otherwise, I'm generally supportive of the changes that I've seen in here.
And one of the things that, in following up with Councilor Demott, I didn't see that specific one, but then there's some of these that have multiple recommendations, but not a single recommendation. And I think it captured comments from all of us, but it didn't come up with a consensus on where we were at. And I think what Mr. Frankel is proposing is not a bad idea, is to look at the ones where they're changed and see if we can reach a consensus and some information back to them, because I know that several of them, especially in what is or isn't allowed under public comments, I'm still very concerned about the presentation stuff that we can't control and what could be showing up in there and what we can't stop. And we'll have a conversation about one of those issues in an executive session later tonight. opening that up for presentations. It's very concerning to me, especially that we want to make sure that we don't violate any First Amendment rights. And I think that would be very right. As the city attorney had indicated during our discussion, that would be a very easy place for us to get in trouble with that. So I'd like to recommend that we still consider looking at, the in-depth review, each of us, look at the recommendations of the changes that are being recommended in this, and then try to get those back to staff. And if we come to a consensus through those that are there, then we can have that come forward maybe at either the next council meeting or the next study session, and see if we can finalize that, then bring it forward for adoption. Mayor Pro Tem Sites, you had and then Councilor DeMott, then I think I've still got the order, and then Councilor Vole. So Mayor Pro Tem.
I think that was from previously, but I'll just say I support that idea of us getting back with specific comments at a later date so that we can get into our executive sessions.
All right. Councilor DeMott, you're still good?
Yep, I'm good right now. Thank you.
All right. Councilor Voles.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make sure I understand. Councilor DeMott, is that the point where we talk about removing the 10-minute limit on council members during council comments?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. I remember that conversation. I would support that. So, but that's fine. We're going to take all the comments later, it sounds like, but I just want to voice my voice of support of that concept. Thank you.
And what I would recommend that each of us put that into your comments back to staff, because that was overlooked. I thought we were pretty close to a resolution of that. And even though it wasn't captured, I think we still need to put those comments back.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
If there's no objection, we'll ask that the council go ahead with the recommendation for Mr. Frankel and get your comments back to them on the changes that are documented in there. If you have anything that was missed, such as this one, please make note of that. Mr. Frankel, anything else from you on that one?
Nothing else, sir. Although, just to clarify, the proposal to discuss certain legal issues in an executive session is absolutely available to council, and we can schedule that at an upcoming meeting. But I don't want to get your hopes up, because the executive sessions that are scheduled tonight are not really touching on the legal issues around amending the council's rules. So it would have to wait for a future meeting.
Understood. Any other comments or questions on regards to this item? All right, Mr. Frankel, I think it's yours and mine for the rest of the night. And we want to do the readings for both of these. We have one for a council and one for WIDA. We're going to do the council one first or the WIDA one first?
I don't know that there's a preference. Mr. Tripp, do you have a preference?
No, we really don't.
I know, because we have staff here for both of them. Is that correct?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Mr. Frankel, let's, for the reading purposes, we've had a request for going to executive session for two different items. One is under the City Council Authority, and the other one's under the Westminster Economic Development Authority. For the purpose of the record, would you read the executive session for City Council first?
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, the proposed executive session for City Council's agenda tonight is to consult with the City Attorney for the purpose of receiving legal advice and a status update in the matter of Eric Brandt versus the City of Westminster, pursuant to CRS 246402-4B and Section 1113C3 of the Westminster Municipal Code.
We've had a request to go into an executive session as defined by the City Attorney. At this point, I will pose each member of council to confirm that they are prepared to go into this executive session, and then I'll have further instructions after we get the approval from council. Councilor Scully,
Yes, sir, I am prepared.
Mayor Pro Tem Sites,
Yes.
Councilor Seymour,
Yes.
Councilor Voles,
Yes.
Councilor DeMott,
Yes.
Councilor Smith,
Yes.
and the mayor is also Mr. Franco, would you read the second one, please?
Yes, sir. The second executive session is for WIDA, and it is an executive session to discuss strategy and progress on 2021 consultant contract negotiations and brokerage contract negotiations with the Laramie Company related to the Downtown Westminster project, and to provide instructions to the authorities negotiators as authorized by Westminster Municipal Code 111.3 C4 and 7, as well as Colorado Revised Statute 24.6.402 4E1.
Okay. We've had a request for the Westminster Economic Development Authority to also enter into an executive session in regards to the item as defined by the city attorney. At this time, I will look to the board members to confirm that they will be prepared to go into the executive session following the first one. Board members, Scully,
Yes, sir.
Vice Chair Seitz.
Yeah.
Board member Seymour,
Yes.
Board member Volz.
I have a quick question. Do we have any guests involved in either of these executive sessions?
We have staff.
Staff only? Okay. Yes, I'm prepared.
Board member Demott,
Yes.
Board member Smith,
Yes.
the chair also. All right, council, and for the purpose of the record, it is now 9:07. We will adjourn from the city council meeting. Remind you that there are two different meetings set up for the executive sessions, and also remind you of two different codes. Make sure you go to the city council meeting first on your codes, but also at this time, so to keep Mr. Frankel off my back, it is now 10:08. We started at 6:30. By our records, we will need to extend the meeting. And again, because of the complexity of the two meetings coming up and the length that they may go, I am not going to recommend that we set a time, but that we will record the time at the finish of each of the executive sessions. We will not be coming back to public meetings, so we will convene from here into the first executive session, finish that one, record those items, go to the second executive session, record those items, and then close for the night. Is that okay, Mr. Frankel?
Or I would just add some indication of consensus that the council and WIDA are both willing to extend the clock tonight to accommodate the two executive sessions.
I'm about to go there. Ms. Scully,
Yes, sir.
Ms. Seitz,
Yes.
Mr. Seymour,
Agree.
Mr. Vols,
Yes.
Mr. Demott.
Yep.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
and me as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, remember, log out of this session, find the meeting notice, get your password, and then we will see you as soon as possible in the city council executive session. For those in the public, we thank you for attending tonight and have a pleasant evening.